As I stood alone at my wife's funeral, my father's words echoed. Blame your wife for losing us that deal. So I made him regret it. Hello, my name is Michael Anthony Johnson. I am 32 years old and the Chief Operating Officer at Carter Dynamics, a company that specializes in supply chain management and transportation logistics. My family, like Carter Dynamics, formerly ran a business in the same field. I used to believe that I would spend my entire life working in the family business, that it would be the foundation for my future. However, life does not always go as planned, and the most devastating blows can come from those we trust. Even though a year has passed, the agony of losing my wife remains within me, like a wound that never really heals. But the betrayal by my own family has made it much more difficult to move on. They chose to turn their backs on me when I needed a hand the most. Not just turn away, but force me out of their lives in the most horrible way conceivable. If there's one thing that bothers me more than the day I lost the woman I loved, it's how my family took advantage of my weakness and stabbed me in the back without hesitation. And that's when I knew I had no choice but to learn to walk alone. It all began over a year ago. After 4 months of battling late ovarian cancer, my wife Ella died while still clutching my hand. We met 3 years ago at an industry meeting in San Diego. Ella was an event organizer at the time, and I had recently taken over management of a tiny business within my family's firm. We met, laughed, and quickly realized we had found something wonderful in one another. Following 2 years of dating, we decided to marry. We expected life to proceed quietly, as it does for so many other couples, falling in love, marrying, and welcoming beautiful small children into a household full of laughter. However, life is seldom so straightforward. We discovered Ella's sickness one morning in March. She suddenly collapsed in the kitchen while preparing breakfast. When I hurried her to the hospital, I assumed she had simply been overworking herself. But then the doctor came out, his face filled with sadness, and told us the news: late-stage ovarian cancer. It was a cold, clinical sentence containing a harsh truth. She had approximately 4 months left. Hearing those words, I felt like my entire world had broken. It felt as if the ground had crushed beneath my feet. All of our hopes and dreams have been reduced to ashes. After hearing the doctor's words, I attempted to conceal the reality. I told myself I had to stay strong and keep smiling as if nothing had happened. But Ella knew. She only had to look into my eyes to grasp everything, without explanation. In the days that followed, I spent almost all of my free time with her. I reduced my workload, declined meetings, and set away anything unneeded. We went for more walks, prepared more dinners together, and talked late into the night, as if we were trying to grasp every precious minute that was slipping gently through our fingers. Sometimes I wished it was all just a bad dream, a nightmare from which I would awaken to find Ella back in the kitchen, laughing and playing one of her foolish little jokes on me. I did everything, from modifying her treatment plans to putting her into the best medical institutes I could locate, hoping for a miracle. However, she died 4 months later, as predicted by the doctors. It was a calm afternoon. The sun shone through the hospital window, draping across her face like a lovely, soothing blanket. Ella gripped my hand tightly and muttered through weak breaths, "Promise me you'll live well, and someday you'll find happiness again." Despite my heart's desire to cling on to her, I nodded and forced a smile, knowing it was the only way to let her go peacefully. 3 days later, we held Ella's funeral. Almost everyone who knew me and Ella showed there that day, including her parents, close friends, former colleagues, and neighbors. They all put their lives on hold and went considerable distances to bid their final farewells. Only my family was missing. My father, Richard Edward Johnson, and my brother, Ethan James Johnson, never arrived. My mother, Laura Michelle Johnson, stopped by for approximately 10 minutes. She stood beside the casket, laid a wreath, and then silently looked for me among the crowd. When I asked her, "Where are Dad and Ethan?" she shook her head and muttered so gently that I had to lean in to hear, "The company's busy. They couldn't make it." I stood there squeezing my hands to contain my rage. That excuse, if it can be called that, felt worse than silence. Because I knew they hadn't paid Ella a single visit in the 4 months she had been fighting. Not even a message. In her final days, she received no words of support. That was the first time in my life I realized that just because they share the same blood doesn't mean they'll be there for you when you need them the most. I returned to work several days after Ella's burial. When I went into the office, my team members paused what they were doing. They approached me one by one, each offering a nod, a solid handshake, or a quick touch on the shoulder. No fancy words. No awkward small conversation. Just genuine expressions of sympathy that spoke more than words could. The internal phone rang at 10 a.m., and I was buried in a mountain of backlogged emails, pushing myself to focus on escaping the weight of reality. My father's icy, lifeless voice came through. "Come up to my office." Without saying anything, I placed down my pen and stood up. When I entered the conference room, my father was already seated at the head of the table. Ethan slouched casually in the chair beside him. Nobody offered me a seat. No one looked at me with sympathy. Before I could say anything, my father spoke. "You're fired. Your shares will be reclaimed." I didn't move. He hadn't called to share my pain or provide assistance. He called me up and told me I was fired. It took me a few seconds to find my voice. When I finally spoke, my throat tightened. "Why?" He spoke quickly, his voice flat and icy as a conviction. "Because you took a week off. The business lost a $200,000 deal." Hearing that, I felt my entire body numb but managed to remain calm. I responded slowly, each syllable measured. "You approved my leave. You said Ethan would cover things while I was gone." Ethan cut in, his voice oozing with arrogance, as if waiting for the right moment to twist the knife. "Don't blame me, Michael. Everyone has to accept responsibility for their own mistakes." Before I could respond, my father turned to Ethan and locked eyes with me. His tone was severe enough to cut. "Exactly. Don't blame Ethan. If you want to blame someone, blame your wife." I stood there, my pulse hammering so hard that it blocked out everything else. I could not believe it. After everything I had given them, everything I had sacrificed, they swept it all away without hesitation. But it did not end there. My father kept speaking, each syllable stinging deeper than the last. "Your wife's death cost the company that contract. Your wife's death is the reason you got fired. If your wife hadn't died, you wouldn't have taken time off and the company would have made a huge profit." The air in the room was so heavy that it felt like it could crush any sound before it formed. I glanced at him, the man who had once been the epitome of everything I believed in my childhood, and realized I had never fully known him. My heart was broken not because of Ella's death. It wasn't the anguish that made me want to fall and cry. It was at this point that I realized my misery was nothing more than an inconvenience in the way of my family's money. I became enraged. I ground out each word, my voice shaking from the effort it required to keep myself together. "What the hell are you saying?" I took a step closer, placing my hands firmly on the cold surface of the table, and locking eyes with him. "My wife died, and you didn't say a damn word. Not once did you check on her. Not once did you visit. And now you stand here dragging her name through the dirt to cover up your failures. Yours and Ethan's." My father slammed his hand down on the table before I could finish speaking. The harsh, forceful sound echoed across the small chamber, causing Ethan to flinch. He yelled, his voice harsh and angry. "Enough! Get the hell out!" Without hesitation, I reached up and ripped off my employee badge, the same one I had proudly worn on my first day as an executive, which he had personally given me. I took it off and hurled it on the table in front of him, landing with a frigid last thud. Without looking back, I walked out of that room, out of the place I had once imagined would always be a part of my life, and I realized then that I had lost this family for good. After leaving my father's office, I discreetly returned to mine. My steps seemed heavy, but I didn't hesitate. I opened my locker and began packing my belongings: one notebook, one pen, and a small framed portrait of Ella and me from our new project. Each item is neatly packed in a plain cardboard box. When a couple of my team members observed me packing, they looked up, surprised and concerned. One of them spoke up, his tone uncertain. "Boss Michael, what's going on?" I simply smiled and nodded my head. I realized there was no use in trying to explain. Suddenly, Lincoln, an employee who had worked closely with me for 2 years, cried out from across the room, his voice filled with rage. "There's a termination email about Michael. They're saying he lost a big contract because he took a week off." The room fell silent. Then another voice came through, filled with wrath. "But his wife just died. That's ridiculous." Whispers swiftly swept throughout the room, and I watched as expressions changed from astonishment to rage. A few minutes later, Lincoln walked forward, his voice steady and booming. "If Michael's leaving, I'm leaving too. I know exactly what Ethan's capable of. He's nothing but a useless hack." Before anyone could react, Nolan, the project team leader, added firmly, "I'm out too. And right after that, Brian, the head of strategic partnerships, calmly set his pen down and said, "Clear as day, count me in." Each sentence felt like another crack shattering the fake image that this company worked so hard to maintain. Standing there, I could only freeze for a moment, my heart bleeding, not because I had just lost a profession into which I had poured my all, but because of these people I had taught, battled alongside, and who chose to stand with me, even when I had no power to offer them. I gulped hard, grasping the package in my hands, and honestly, I had no idea what to say. For the first time that day, all I had was one brutal sentence: "Your wife's death is the reason you got fired." I could have forgiven them if the grief they inflicted had been directed only at me. I had previously forcefully told myself to look the other way, that blood bonds could never completely be broken. But if they tried to offend Ella, the woman I loved the most, the woman who departed this world in anguish and loneliness, even if she was no longer alive, I would never let them taint her memory again. At that point, I made a pledge to myself. I would show them that the betrayal, coldness, and cruelty they had sown would all come back to haunt them. I would not yell. I would not seek vengeance with uncontrolled rage. I'd repay everything they owed me, with achievement, power, and unwavering determination. And when that day arrived, I would stand before them with no pity in my eyes. Not because I had grown callous, but because they chose this ending, after using my wife's death to justify their shortcomings. The next day, after a long night of thought, I took a week off to travel. I needed time alone, a period of silence to begin healing from Ella's death and to calm the fresh wounds caused by my own family. For the entire week, I was utterly disconnected. No emails, calls, or texts. Just me, a few strange cities, and boundless roads where my melancholy could fade into the breeze. The week flew by. As I returned to my old residence that afternoon, a similar blank sadness came over me. I tossed my suitcase into the corner, sunk into the sofa, and grabbed my phone. When I turned it on, the screen filled up with missed calls, unread messages, and email notifications. The pulsing blue light felt almost taunting, as if the world had spun forward while I remained motionless. I scrolled through the emails. The majority were trash adverts or belated letters from old colleagues. But then my finger came to a name I recognized all too well. Matthew Carter. Matthew, a former friend and longtime rival of my family's business. Without hesitation, I opened the email. Inside, there was only one line: "Call me as soon as you see this." There were no explanations or light conversation. Without hesitation, I phoned his number. The phone only rung twice, before he answered. Matthew's voice filtered through, urgent but measured. "Michael, are you free tonight? I want to take you to dinner. There's something important we need to discuss." I stopped for a while before responding without hesitation. "Sure. Just send me the address." After hanging up, I sat there for a long time, a peculiar sense of anticipation rising within me. I had a sensation that something was about to shift, and I knew I needed to be prepared. That evening, I arrived at the restaurant Matthew had given me the address for. Matthew had arrived 5 minutes earlier. When he saw me coming in, he rose up and shook my hand, his eyes reflecting a genuine sincerity. We didn't get right into business. After a few brief words of encouragement, we ate dinner and talked about minor matters. When dessert was eventually served, I put my knife and fork down, looked up at him, and got right to the point. "So what's this dinner really about?" Matthew leaned back in his chair, his countenance becoming serious. "I heard you got fired," I said with a faint smirk, my voice tinted with cynicism. "News travels fast, huh?" Matthew continued, his tone calm and methodical, as if he had carefully chosen his words. "Because you're talented, Michael. I'm willing to bet you've gotten no less than 10 offers from rival companies this past week." I only smiled, neither confirming nor denying, but Matthew's expression told me he knew. A few seconds later, Matthew leaned forward, his voice low but forceful, as if he had practiced it. "Come work for me. I'll make you Chief Operating Officer, and here's the deal. You can bring your team with you. I'm not joking, Michael. If you don't come with me, I'll ensure no other competitor touches you." As soon as he finished, Matthew burst out laughing, a crisp, confident chuckle that rang around the diner. Even through the laughs, I could tell he was dead serious. I sat there for a bit, sipping my water and considering the offer. Matthew quickly added, his voice softening, "You don't have to decide tonight. Think it over. Give me your answer in 3 days." Right then, I laid my glass down, locked eyes with him, and stated without hesitation, "No need for 3 days. Draw up the contract. I'll be at your office first thing in the morning. As long as you keep your word, my team will accompany me." Matthew's eyes lit up briefly, as if he had just won a big triumph. 20 minutes later, we exited the restaurant together. Standing under the silent night sky, I took a deep breath and felt a genuine spark of hope for the first time in weeks. This time I realized I was starting over, not for my family, but for myself. The next morning, I arrived at Carter Dynamics at exactly 8 a.m. The brand new office building stood out in the middle of downtown. Not flashy, but polished, professional, and remarkable in all aspects. As soon as I reached the lobby, I noticed Matthew waiting for me. He stepped over and gave me a solid handshake, his eyes filled with genuine trust. "Welcome home, Michael." After that, we went straight to the elevators. Matthew said very little on the trip up. Perhaps he realized that I didn't need hollow words right now. I required action. When we got to the executive floor, he led me into a small private meeting room that had already been set up for us. A hefty contract was sitting on the table, with a slick fountain pen carefully put beside it. Matthew smiled slightly, his voice calm and confident. "I kept my word. You'll be our chief operating officer. Salary, benefits, and the clause allowing you to bring your team are all in there." Without hesitation, I grabbed up the pen and began skimming the words. Every line on the paper felt like evidence that I wasn't just a pawn in someone else's game this time. It took me less than 10 minutes to sign everything. When I put down the pen for the last time, Matthew stretched out and grabbed my shoulder firmly. "I know you're not going to let me down." He walked out of the room, leaving me alone with the freshly signed forms. I sat for another minute, taking in a deep breath. At that moment, a peculiar sensation flooded over me. Not exactly excitement, not quite relief, but a quiet, unwavering determination. The word that Michael Anthony Johnson had joined Carter Dynamics circulated rapidly throughout the logistics and transportation industries. By that morning, my phone had been ringing non-stop. Message after message, call after call, email after email, all from former coworkers, folks who had formerly worked with me at the family business. As I browsed through my email, familiar names appeared: the chief engineer, the head of operations, and the warehouse supervisor, and each message contained the same simple phrase: "If there's a spot for me, I want to come with you." Without hesitation, I began writing a list. In my heart, there was no room for two-faced folks or those who just knew how to follow the changing winds. I chose just those who had supported and believed in me when I had nothing else. Those who valued loyalty over simple possibilities. That afternoon, Matthew and I had an emergency meeting. When I delivered him the list, he chuckled with satisfaction. "You've pulled together all the heavy hitters from back in the day. You're bringing a championship team over here, Michael." I responded with a quick smile. "There's no need for huge words. There is no need for boasting." We both felt this squad would lay the groundwork for something big. The internal interviews the following day were brief and to the point. There were no screening rounds or difficult examinations. Just one simple question I asked each of them: "Do you still trust me enough to fight by my side again?" And no one hesitated. Every handshake was solid, and every look was full of confidence. We, those who had formerly been rejected, doubted, and underestimated, would reconstruct everything from the rubble that others had left behind. The days that followed went by so swiftly. I could barely feel the time passing. With word of my transfer to Carter Dynamics spreading and my reputation established over the years, I scarcely had to raise a finger to acquire business. Everything changed when clients learned I was no longer with the family business. It became evident that the ties I had spent years establishing were not solely due to the Johnson name, but also because of myself. No cold calls or sales emails. Major clients, the same partners who had put their trust in me on countless projects, began to withdraw from my previous company. Contracts were canceled, cooperation proposals were withdrawn, and meetings were rescheduled indefinitely. All of this occurred in less than a month after I departed. I didn't feel smug. I did not celebrate it. But I wasn't sorry either. When my family chose betrayal, they severed the bonds that had once represented the most exceptional value I had ever offered them. Now they were reaping what they had sowed. And, as I had predicted, my phone rang 2 months later on a late evening as I was finishing up my papers before heading home. When I looked at the screen, the name that displayed made me pause for a second. Richard Edward Johnson. I spread a faint, frigid smile on my lips. I knew the call would come sooner or later. I responded calmly, my voice steady. "What do you want, Dad?" I talked first. His voice came through right away, albeit slightly strained. "Michael, we need to talk." I remained silent and cool, waiting for him to get to the point. Richard spoke a few seconds later, as if reading from a script, with a measured tone. "Would you consider coming back? The company's struggling. We need you." I said nothing. I just waited and let him fill the stillness. His voice lowered, a rare hint of urgency leaking through. "I'm willing to offer you 30% more than what Carter Dynamics is paying you. And your shares, they'll be reinstated." I closed my eyes briefly, allowing the nothingness to spread gently from within. Promises and belated offers aren't really sensible right now. I raised my sight to the city lights shimmering outside the window and murmured slowly, "Do you remember what you said to me that day?" The line fell silent right after I asked my question. No justifications, no sighs, just a heavy, unmistakable quiet. The quiet spoke louder than any words could. And in that moment, I knew for certain that everything between us had finished a long time ago. Today was the day we finally stated it aloud. Following yesterday night's call, I assumed they'd get the message and leave me alone. But I was mistaken. The next morning at 7, the doorbell began to ring loudly and relentlessly. I was still in the kitchen making coffee when it started, the noise dragging on until I had to set down my mug and rush to the door. When I opened it, my mother was standing there. She appeared worn down and shattered, her face smeared with tears, her hands trembling as if desperately clutching to any glimmer of hope. When she saw me, she raced forward, her voice trembling and choked with tears. "Michael, please come back. The family needs you. I'm begging you." I tightened my grasp on the doorframe and kept my voice calm. There was no rage left inside me, only a chilly, heavy calm. A warning from a former coworker who had surreptitiously messaged me came to mind just then. "Be careful. They only want you back to salvage the firm. Once it is stable, they will toss you out again, as they did previously." I didn't need any other proof. I took a deep breath, raised my head and stared directly at my mother, the woman who had once held me in her arms but now stood before me like a desperate negotiator in a one-sided negotiation. My voice lowered, colder than it had ever been. "That's enough, Mom." She looked up at me surprised, with tears flowing down her face. I stepped completely out onto the porch, my voice steady and unshaken. "I know everything. I know about the company collapsing. If I return, when things are fixed, you'll push me out again. Just like last time." She opened her lips to deny it, but I interrupted her with a raised hand. "Save it. Last time I lost everything because I believed in family. It's not happening again." Right then I took out my phone and held it up between us, saying steadily, "I've already filed for a restraining order. Starting today, you, Dad and Ethan are not allowed within a single step of me. If you keep harassing me, the police will get involved." She froze, her face losing color and her mouth moving silently as if to implore. But I'd already turned back inside. The sound of the door closing behind me rang throughout the home, signaling the end. I leaned against it and closed my eyes for a few seconds. No more agony. There is no longer anger. Only freedom. Without me, the family business spiraled out of control. Within a few months, big contracts were canceled, old partners abandoned the company, key workers left, and Ethan and Richard slid deeper into the devastation they had built for themselves. I didn't care. I did not follow their decline step by step. Nonetheless, the news reached me through acquaintances, business colleagues, and cold, detached business stories. One evening, while I sat on the balcony, nursing a glass of whiskey over melting ice, my phone called. I wasn't surprised when the name Ethan James Johnson appeared on the screen. I paused for less than a second before picking up. Ethan's fury-filled voice erupted through the speaker as soon as the phone connected. "This is all your fault." The words struck my ear like a smack. But I remained motionless, my gaze as serene and steady as a quiet lake. After a single breath, I raised my glass, took a little drink and responded, my voice as cold as steel. "I built it up, and I can tear it down." On the other end of the telephone, Ethan paused, stunned. I hung up without hesitation, denying him the opportunity to say anything else. I leaned back in my chair, gazing up at the bright night sky. There is no sense of triumph or victory, only the inevitable conclusion. They had to pay for their greed and disloyalty. 2 weeks ago, on a late afternoon, the doorbell rang unexpectedly while I was reviewing some new operating plans. I grimaced immediately. I wasn't expecting anyone that day. Walking to the door and opening it, the sight that met me made me want to slam it shut straight away. Richard and Ethan. They stood there, pallid and disheveled, unlike the arrogant, self-assured men they once were. Their eyes avoided mine, but their clenched fists revealed their desperation, as if they were holding to the last shreds of dignity they possessed. Slowly, I folded my arms across my chest and leaned comfortably against the doorframe, my voice as icy as ice. "What do you want?" Richard cleared his throat quickly, his eyes flickering frantically as he searched for the appropriate words. "Michael, your brother and we need your help." I didn't respond. I just raised an eyebrow and waited. Ethan took an awkward half-step forward, his voice scratchy and unsteady. "We know this house. You repurchased it when you were working for the family company. Technically, it was with the help of the family. Dad and I hoped you could sell it and use the money to save the company." Hearing that, I let out a quick, harsh laugh that immediately froze the air between us. Before they could make any more weak justifications, I spoke quietly and sharply, each word like a sword. "If you don't want to deal with the police, I suggest you get off my property within 30 seconds. Ethan was frightened as soon as I said those words, lifting his hands and quivering. "Wait, Michael, just hear us out. If not selling, then maybe just a loan. Just a small one. We need $50,000 to start over." Richard soon responded, frantic. "That's right, Michael. Just 50 grand. It's nothing to you now. We're family, aren't we? Family helps each other in hard times." I clenched my fists, trying to contain the rage that was rising inside me. Ella's pale face on the hospital bed, her tiny hand clutching mine as she said farewell, came to mind at that moment. I stared at the two men standing in front of me, my voice lowering to a deadly stillness. "You want my help?" I took a step forward, getting near enough so they couldn't avoid my stare. "Fine," I said slowly, accentuating each syllable. "Go to the cemetery. Kneel at my wife's grave. Beg her for forgiveness for everything you did to her." I stopped for a beat before finishing, my voice crisp and final. "If she forgives you, then I will too." Richard and Ethan stood there, stunned into silence. Neither could speak a word. I quietly shut the door in their faces, hearing the sound of their frantic footsteps departing down the driveway. I leaned against the door, closing my eyes. Inside the silent house, there is no more wrath or anguish, simply the tranquility that comes from finally reclaiming your self-respect. If you're still here, listening to my story after all this time, I have one thing to say to you. Thank you for remaining with me. I understand that this trip has not been easy to hear, and even more difficult to accept, for often the hardest hurts come from those we once loved most. When I left my family and the company that I previously thought would be my life's work, I took a lot of guilt with me. Some evenings, I wondered whether I was wrong. Was I being too unkind by turning my back? But over time, I realized that enduring does not always entail loving. Sacrificing isn't always noble. Some families and relationships are simply hollow shells, rotten on the inside long before we are willing to accept it. And if you continue to cling to them solely for the sake of family, or out of a sense of responsibility, you will eventually lose yourself. So if you find yourself in a similar situation today, in a toxic family, a rotting corporation, or a disrespectful relationship, allow yourself to choose a different choice. Decide to step into the light. Choose yourself. Choose your dignity. Do not look back. Don't lament something that was never truly worthy of you. And if somebody ever asked me, if you could do it all over again, would you make the same choice? I would say without hesitation, no, and walk away. And I would not look back. Before I complete the story, I'd like to ask you, those of you who are still here, listening until the very end, what you would do if you were in my shoes, if you stood in front of a family that was eager to discard you the moment you collapsed, if you were betrayed at your most vulnerable. Would you keep going, attempting to piece things back together? Or would you rather walk away, protect yourself, and never look back? Thanks for watching and diving into this wild family drama with me. If you love Reddit family drama, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. My brother got my fiancée pregnant, and my dad gave him the family business and a house, so I decided to make them both pay for their betrayal. Hello everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let us keep this channel growing collectively. Thank you very much. Now, let's begin the video. Okay, people, this is going to be long, but I need to get this off my chest. The recent events in my family have been extremely upsetting, but in order to understand why, you must first understand the context. I am 33 years old, and I grew up with my younger brother Alex, who is 30 years old, in what appeared to be a normal household from the outside. But, gosh, the dynamics in our house were severely off. See, Alex was a miraculous baby. Mom had a difficult pregnancy with him, and he was quite sick for the first couple of years, in and out of the hospital, breathing problems, infections, the entire thing. I recall sitting in hospital waiting rooms a lot as a child. I understand that having a sick child is scary, but even when Alex recovered, my parents, particularly my father, continued to treat him as if he were made of glass. Meanwhile, I was expected to be the perfect, responsible elder brother who should know better about everything. Alex could miss school. He needed to recuperate. Alex failed a class. He has been through a lot. Alex broke something expensive. Don't be upset with your brother, what about me? From the age of 7, I was expected to obtain excellent grades, never say anything back, work around the house, and overall act like a small grown-up. The double standard was ridiculous. I recall one incident in high school when I received detention for being late to class and was grounded for a week. That same month, Alex was caught skipping school to hang out with his friends at the mall, and my parents had just spoken with him about it. When I was 15, I started working with my father in his electrical business, not because I was particularly interested in becoming an electrician, but because it was the only way I could obtain his attention or acceptance. And you know what? I actually grew better at it. Very good. I began learning everything I could about electrical work, staying late to watch Dad handle the difficult tasks, reading manuals, and watching YouTube videos to learn more. Meanwhile, Alex remained, well, Alex. He was a smart kid when he wanted to be, but he lacked work ethic. He could enchant everyone with his sad little ill kid routine, which he never outgrew. He attempted college for about 2 semesters, got out because it was too stressful, began an online business selling dropship trash that flopped, and then tried to be a day trader, losing a lot of his father's money. But nevertheless, I was still the one receiving lectures about supporting your brother and putting family first. I won't lie, it made me feel a strange mix of hatred and responsibility. I liked my brother because he was my brother, but I couldn't tolerate being around him the most of the time. We were complete opposites. I was the serious, hard-working person who valued keeping my word and doing things well. He was the fun one who never faced repercussions and believed regulations were for other people. Dad's business was dependable, basic home electrical work, some small commercial work, nothing special, but it paid the bills. I saw potential in it, however. When I wasn't working, I was studying about new technologies, smart home systems, and security installations. Dad was old school, preferring to do things the way he'd always done them, but I insisted on modernizing and taking on larger projects. The strange thing is that even when I brought in new clients or completed large projects flawlessly, Dad would find a way to credit Alex. Your brother's charm really helps with customer relations. He answered phones sometimes. Alex has such good ideas for the business. He suggested we get a website. In 2020, I moved out as soon as I could afford it. I moved into my own place around 20 minutes from my parents' house, close enough to help with the business but far enough away to have some space. I felt I was doing fairly well. You know, I had my own place, made decent money, and was learning new skills. I was even considering getting my master electrician license and even having my own business someday. Sophie, a 29-year-old female, and I met around 6 years ago while working on a large rewiring job at these upscale flats downtown. She was the property manager there. The first time I saw her, she was arguing with some HVAC technicians about their substandard work, getting into the technical specifics of why their installation was not up to code. I recall thinking, damn, she actually knows her stuff. Most property managers I'd dealt with wanted things done cheaply and quickly, but Sophie was different. She had read through all of the electrical codes and knew exactly what she wanted done. For the first few weeks on the job, she kept coming around to inspect our work, not in an irritating way, but because she truly wanted to know what we were doing and why. I began taking lunch breaks when I realized she'd be making her rounds. We'd discuss the project first, then about other topics. She told me about growing up with her father, a general constructor, and how she learned everything about construction by helping him on assignments. I informed her about my desire to update my father's business and potentially grow into more commercial work. She was simple to chat to, right? I could rave about my family turmoil, and she understood. Her brother was also the beloved kid, a hotshot lawyer who could do no wrong. We joked about forming a support group for responsible siblings. After we finished the apartment job, I assumed that was it, but about a week later, she called the office to report an urgent electrical problem in her own apartment. Dad asked me to check it out. It turned out there was nothing wrong. She just wanted to see me again. I have to say, that was a really nice maneuver. We began dating after that. Sophie was different from the other girls I dated. She did not play games or expect me to read her mind. If something bothered her, she would simply express it. If she was happy, you would know. She also showed genuine interest in my job. She'd help me study for my licensure examinations and eventually started assisting with the business side of things. Within a year, she was effectively running our business, having implemented a new scheduling system, upgraded our invoicing, and prepared actual contracts in place of the handwritten quotes we used to use. Dad was initially unhappy about it. He preferred doing everything on paper, but he had to acknowledge the firm was functioning more smoothly. I finally felt like I was creating something real. We moved in together after 2 years and started talking about marriage and even having children someday. Sophie would joke about our future children becoming electricians and carrying on the family business. Man, I thought I had everything sorted out. The weird part is that my family liked her at first. Mom was continually calling us over for supper, asking Sophie for assistance with computer issues, or soliciting her advice on house renovations. Even Dad warmed up to her once he realized how much she was contributing to the company's growth. We were gaining larger contracts, doing more commercial work, and establishing a solid reputation in the area. Sophie got along well with Alex too. When I became irritated with his latest unsuccessful attempt, she would defend him, telling me that I should try to understand his point of view better, how growing up unwell might have influenced him. Looking back, I should have recognized that as a red flag, but you know how it is when you really trust someone. You do not want to see the signs. We became engaged after 4 years together. Nothing spectacular. I proposed at home after we finished the massive project we had been working on together. She'd been helping me plan this large electrical renovation for a nearby hospital, staying up late with me to go over blueprints and deal with contractors. It just felt right, you know. As if we were true partners in everything. Around a year ago, things began to change. Alex had spent another chunk of Dad's money trying to launch a cryptocurrency trading business, returned home bankrupt, and Dad offered him a job in our office. Just the basics. Answering phones, filing papers, and organizing appointments. It should have been simple enough, but Alex always managed to screw it up. Sophie began spending more time at my parents' place, assisting Mom with wedding preparations and such. She stated it was easier to focus on company documents there while Alex was learning the procedures. I was working most days, so it made sense at the time. Following that, everything began to spiral out of control. I began to notice subtle changes about 8 months before everything blew up. Nothing big at first, just minor details that didn't line up. Sophie was spending more time at my parents' house, helping with business matters. She explained that she was educating Alex on our new billing system and assisting Mom with wedding plans. Makes sense, right? I was out on jobs most days, working my tail off to save money for our future. We planned the entire wedding and talked about buying a property. I wanted to do things correctly. But then other things started happening. Sophie changed her phone's password. She has never actually hidden her phone before. We knew each other's passwords. It was no big problem, but she started acting strangely about it. She explained that her banking app required her to update security or something. Whatever, I absolutely trusted her, so I didn't think much of it. Then Alex began acting differently. He began wearing cologne at work. Dude used to turn up half the time in the same clothes as yesterday. He got all these new clothing and started showing up to work on time, which was unusual for him. He was also strangely polite to me, volunteering to stay late at the office and expressing a strong desire to study business. Sophie was talking about him differently. Alex is really getting good at handling the scheduling, or, your brother's actually pretty smart when he applies himself. She'd get angry whenever I complained about his messing something up, and even started taking his side in family disputes. The atmosphere in the office also becomes strange. Janet, our receptionist for the past 15 years, was like a second mother to us. She began giving me these looks while Sophie and Alex were working late together, but whenever I asked what was going on, she would simply say nothing and change the subject. Once, I returned to the office early from a task because we had run out of materials. Sophie and Alex were in the break room, giggling over something. There was nothing clearly wrong, but they both jumped as if they had been caught doing something when I stepped in. Sophie mentioned that they were just going over some invoices around 7 p.m. Right. Sophie seemed to talk less about our future. She used to be quite enthused about wedding planning, looking at houses online, and discussing what kind of family we'd have. Then she became quiet about it all. She claimed she was just anxious about work. The true red flag I missed was when she stopped visiting job sites to check on projects. It used to be our thing. She'd bring lunch, we'd go over plans, and solve problems together, but she was suddenly too busy at work with Alex. We had a large family meal approximately 6 months ago. Sophie was acting funny all night, barely speaking and constantly checking her phone. Alex kept attempting to make inside jokes with her. Sophie snorted with laughter when he mentioned that insane person at work. But when I questioned what was hilarious, they both said, "You had to be there." After dinner, on the way home, I finally brought it up. Sophie remained glancing at her phone. "You okay? You seemed off tonight." "Just tired. Work's been crazy." "Yeah, it seems like you and Alex are getting along better these days." She tightened up but tried to keep it casual. "He's not as bad as you always say. He's actually pretty funny when you get to know him." "Funny enough to make you ignore everyone else at dinner? What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, just that you've been different lately. Distant. Always on your phone." She became defensive quickly. "Oh, so I'm not allowed to have my own conversations now? Everything has to be about you?" That threw me off guard. Sophie never spoke to me like that before. "That's not what I said. Just feels like something's changed. Maybe you're just paranoid. I'm tired of you always complaining about Alex. He's trying his best." I recall getting a horrible feeling in my stomach, like if something was seriously wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. She had never defended Alex like that before. "Since when are you Team Alex?" "Since I actually got to know him instead of just listening to you bashing him all the time." We drove the rest of the way silently. Man, all the symptoms were there: the protective attitude, the phone, the inside jokes, the way she suddenly thought Alex was fantastic. But you never want to believe someone you absolutely trust could do that to you, especially not your own brother. I recall lying there that night, watching her try to sleep and thinking, "Nah, I'm just being paranoid." The next several months were just more of the same. Sophie working late, Alex becoming interested in the business, and me being a complete idiot working 12-hour days to save for our future while my brother was stealing my girl right under my nose. Then came the day when everything burst. It was Tuesday. I recall because I was working on a large commercial project that involved rewiring a warehouse. Sophie called about 2 p.m., crying so hard I couldn't hear her. She claimed she needed to speak with me in person and that it was urgent. My immediate impression was that something had happened to her parents. I told my colleagues that I had a family emergency and drove straight home. I discovered her sitting in her car in our driveway. She refused to come inside, instead sitting there gripping the steering wheel as if it was the only thing holding her together. I sat in the passenger seat, waiting for her to say anything. "I'm pregnant," she explained. For a few seconds, all I felt was happiness. We discussed starting a family after the wedding, and suddenly it was happening. I started talking about how we'd work things out, and how we could move the wedding up if necessary. She kept crying. "There's more," she said, choking. "It might not be yours." Everything within me became still. My brain initially refused to accept it, as if I needed to repeat it to ensure that I had heard her correctly. "Might not be mine?" My voice sounded strange, as if it weren't even mine. "Who else would it be?" I paused. It all connected at once: the late nights, the sudden secrecy with her phone, and the strange discomfort whenever I mentioned it. "No." I gazed at her, waiting for her to deny it and tell me I was wrong. She did not. "It's not him," she sighed. My hands tightened into fists. "Sophie," my voice was strong and demanding. "Tell me it's not Alex." She made a broken sound in her throat. "It wasn't supposed to happen." I gave a harsh laugh, but there was no comedy in it. "Oh right, you just tripped and fell into my brother's bed." "It wasn't like that," she replied hastily. "It was one time." I shut her off. "One time?" My head was pounding. "Tell me the truth, nothing but quiet." "How long?" Her breathing sounded unsteady. 3 months. Maybe 4. I had to press my hands on my knees to keep myself steady. "Does he know?" My voice was tight and controlled. She nodded. "I told him yesterday." "That's when I realized I had to tell you too." I stared at her, As if she wanted me to be relieved she had finally decided to come honest. I got out of the car because I needed air. She followed me, attempting to explain how it wasn't planned, how horrible they both felt, and how they had ended it weeks before. All I could think about was them laughing in the break room during those late-night work sessions. "Were you ever going to tell me if you weren't pregnant?" She did not respond to that. It explained all I needed to know. I hopped into my truck and drove directly to my folks' place. I found Alex in the office, doing business as usual. When he saw my face, he knew I knew. "Listen, bro, I can explain. I don't remember what happened next. It's all a blur, but I recall him on the ground with blood gushing from his nose. Dad and 2 of our employees are pushing me away from him." Alex began ranting about how I was crazy, how Sophie had come onto him first, and how they were in love. In love. My own brother, the guy who'd seen me plan my future with this lady and sat there at Sunday dinners knowing exactly what he was doing. Dad got between us, tried to calm everyone down, and told us we had to address this like adults. That's when Alex released the next bombshell. "She's having my baby. You can't just ignore that." Dad's face turned white. I guess he wasn't aware of that portion yet. Mom began crying. Janet grabbed her purse and walked away. I found out later that she quit that day, saying she couldn't work for people like them. I glanced at my father and said, "He's your problem now. I'm done." Dad attempted to stop me, saying, "Son, wait. We can figure this out. Family is family." I told him Alex ceased being my family the moment he touched my fiancée. I walked out and haven't returned since. Sophie was still at our house when I arrived home. She was sitting on the couch, crying, after packing her bags. "I never meant to hurt you," she explained. "It just got complicated." I informed her she had 24 hours to grab her belongings and leave. I didn't care where she went. Block my number, lose my address. "What about the baby?" she inquired. "Better hope it's Alex's, because if it's mine, we're doing a DNA test and going through lawyers." She tried to speak more, but I walked away. I drove to my friend Mike's apartment and stayed for a few days while she moved out. So, after everything happened, I remained at my friend Mike's house for approximately a week. I turned off my phone. I simply needed to comprehend everything. Mike is a real one. Didn't try to offer counsel or anything, simply let me crash. When I eventually put my phone back on, I had about 50 missed calls, the majority of which were from my parents, some from Sophie, and a couple from Alex. This dude has some nerve. But I only listened to Mom's messages. She was crying in the majority of them, pleading with me to come talk to Dad, who claimed to have a solution. I should have known Dad's answer would be manipulative nonsense, but I went anyway, primarily because Mom sounded so distraught. Walking into that house was strange. I found everyone in the living room. Mom looked like she hadn't slept for days. Dad sat in his normal recliner, looking serious, as if he were preparing to give one of his lectures. Alex was also there, with a lovely bruised nose. I'm not going to lie, that felt amazing to see. Dad cleared his throat and smacked me with a diamond. "Son, I've been thinking about how to resolve this situation in a way that benefits everyone. Since you're clearly not willing to work things out with Sophie, and given her condition, I think it makes sense for her and Alex to get married." I actually laughed. I literally laughed in his face. But he wasn't finished. "Furthermore, since they'll be starting a family, I think it's appropriate for Alex to take over the business. With Sophie's experience running the office and Alex learning the trade, they could—" "Alex learning the trade?" I interrupted him. "He can't even wire a account outlet without supervision." Dad had the same look he typically does when someone disturbs him. "Language, and your brother has shown real interest in learning. In fact, I want you to train him." Guys, I've lost it. I started laughing again, but it was the kind of insane chuckle you get when something is so twisted up that you can't process it. "Let me get this straight," I remarked. "You want me to train the brother who screwed my fiancée to take over the business I helped build, while they're married and raising a kid that might be mine? Are you actually insane?" Mom began crying again. Alex simply sat there, staring at the floor like a coward. Dad took out his final card. "This business is still in my name. If you won't help your brother, maybe you should find somewhere else to work." That's when I realized all those years of hard effort had been for nothing. All of my hard work, the business I brought in, and the reputation I earned were insignificant in comparison to precious Alex's latest blunder. I just got up and headed to the door. Mom tried to stop me, but I just said, "I'm done. Good luck with your new golden team." Alex eventually spoke up. "Bro, wait." I turned around and simply stated, "Call me bro again, and I'll break more than your bro nose." Dad raged at me about loyalty and second chances. I did not even look back. The next day, I began calling all of our big clients, including those with whom I had personal relationships. I informed them that I was departing and offered some other reputable contractors they could work with. Dad called, yelling about how I was attempting to damage the business. I told him I was only informing my clients that I would no longer be handling their jobs. It's not my responsibility if they don't want to work with his new ideal team. Alex and Sophie genuinely agreed to the entire thing. They married at the courthouse 2 weeks later, as if it were a love story rather than a total betrayal. Dad even backed them up, giving them a down payment on a house as a reward for what they'd done. Meanwhile, I was left standing amid the ruins of all I believed I knew. There was no apology, no meaningful consequences, only the expectation that I move on while they played happy family. So, I did. I walked away from it all. I took a position with one of our old competitors, where my work was respected rather being treated as an afterthought. Better income, genuine recognition, and best of all, no family drama. I pushed everything into starting over and developing my own reputation. I even acquired my master electrician's license, something Dad always claimed I wasn't ready for. Turns out, I was more than prepared. I just had to get out of his shadow to prove it. I didn't hear much about the family business for approximately 4 months. Mom would occasionally text me, but I requested her not to inform me about Alex or Sophie. I didn't need the stress in my life. Then, last week, I received a call from Mom at approximately 11 p.m. She started crying again, claiming Dad needed to talk to me right away. I almost hung up, but she seemed quite disturbed. "Please," she asked. "I know you have every right to say no, but we're about to lose everything." I was truly curious and remained on the line. Dad came on, and his voice was different, not the typical I know everything tone. He sounded broken. It turns out that allowing Alex to run the business was exactly the nightmare I predicted. This genius screwed up 3 large commercial jobs so horribly that one customer has threatened to sue us for code violations. I'm talking about fundamental things like incorrect gauge wiring, missing ground wires, and junction boxes put without covers, mistakes that may practically burn a building down. And things get better. Instead of recruiting qualified electricians, he appointed his drinking buddy from college as chief electrician. The guy's whole electrical experience involved changing light bulbs in his flat. No license, no credentials, and probably couldn't tell the difference between a voltage meter and a screwdriver. They run a real professional operation there. Then there's the monetary side. Alex reportedly neglected to pay their liability insurance. Consider this. You're in the electrical company. They'd lose everything with one accident or fire. But, hey, why spend money on frivolous things like insurance when you can pocket the cash instead? Because that's exactly what he was doing. Accepting cash payments from consumers while conveniently failing to record them in the books. And the financial genius had been taking out loans against the firm without informing Dad. Multiple loans. We're talking significant money here. And the best part? Nobody can figure out where all that money went. Nothing in his bank account, nothing in his investments, it all vanished like magic. I'm betting his new automobile and the luxury clothes he's been wearing could be a hint. It's almost impressive how thoroughly he ruined everything in just a few months. Dad spent 30 years building this firm, and Alex virtually destroyed it in less than half a year. That's what happens when you give over a profitable business to someone whose greatest accomplishment was becoming the beer pong team captain in college. Dad finally found out when their insurance was canceled, and he began looking into the books. Alex had been concealing all of the difficulties by tampering with the papers, as Sophie had taught him during all of those late hours at work. Most of their seasoned members quit. I can't blame them. Alex treated them poorly, and checks began to bounce. Janet, our previous receptionist, evidently tried to notify Dad about strange activity in the accounts months ago, but he refused to listen. Dad's voice was shaking as he told me all of this, and then he slapped me with, "Son, I need you to come back, help me fix this. We can make you majority owner, give you full control." I told him that I needed to think about it. He started to become desperate. "Please, we're going to lose everything, the business, the house, everything I built. Your mother, she's not handling this well." Then he played his last card. Alex and Sophie split up. She left last week, just disappeared. Left a note saying not to contact her. The baby. We don't even know where she is. Alex wasn't daddy material after all. My response was, "Not my circus, not my monkeys anymore." Dad began with his typical guilt trip about family and devotion. I cut him off. "Remember when I begged you not to give the business to Alex? When I told you he'd run it into the ground? What was it you said? Oh yeah, family is family. Well, this is your family's mess now. Mom called back, weeping about how they might be homeless soon. That hit hard. Mom did not deserve any of this. She's the only one who's ever attempted to keep the family together, the only one who hasn't taken sides, even when she probably should have. I told her she may come and stay with me at any moment. It's just her. Not Dad. Not Alex. I can't leave your father, she explained. I exhaled. Then that's your choice, Mom, but my door is only open for you. It sucked knowing she would never go through it. A few days later, Sophie texted me. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need help. The baby's yours. I got the test results. Alex took all my money and disappeared. Please, I don't have anywhere else to go. I read it, stared at it, and set my phone down. Did not respond. Not going to. But damn if it didn't sit there like a stone in my gut, like a punch I knew was coming but couldn't handle. It should have meant something. It should have been life-changing. But all I felt was tiredness, like if I had finally climbed out of this mess just to have it reach back and try to drag me under again. And for the first time, I didn't know what to do. Dad showed up at my place last night while I was still trying to figure out what was going on. There was no notice, simply standing there when I arrived home from work. Looking grungy, wearing an old jacket I recall from my childhood. Hadn't shaven in what seemed like weeks. First thing I noticed was that he was driving Mom's old Civic rather than his truck. Later, they discovered that they needed to sell his truck to pay off some of the business's debts. Can we talk? He requested, not demanding as usual. He truly sounded exhausted. I invited him in because I really wanted him to see how I was doing without his assistance. My new house is quite nice. I received it following my last promotion. Nothing spectacular, but it's mine. I earned it myself. He stood in my living room, looking bewildered, as if he didn't know how to communicate with me other than by delivering commands. Finally, he sat down and began pouring everything. The business is essentially dead. They're being sued by 2 business clients over Alex's rubbish work. After that, the majority of their home customers abandoned them, complaining about jobs that were left unfinished. The bank is coming for the house next month. I should have listened to you, he explained. This is the first time I've ever heard him confess to being incorrect about anything. I told him that was good to hear, but it was late. Then he took out this folder. Inside, there was papers to transfer 100% ownership of the company to me with no strings attached. You can save it, he replied. You always knew what you were doing. I was just too proud to see it. Do you know what is crazy? 6 months ago, this would have been everything I wanted. All that validation, finally having power, and Dad admitting I was correct. But while glancing at those papers, I wondered, what happened to Alex? Dad's face simply crumpled. Alex cleared out their savings account last week and disappeared. Left this note about needing to find himself or some BS. Classic Alex, causes a mess and then flees from the consequences. He's still your brother, Dad explained calmly. Number, you replied. He stopped being my brother the day he decided family loyalty meant nothing to him. Sound familiar? That struck him hard. Good. He began telling me how he could help me restore the firm, how we could collaborate and be a genuine family again. I had to laugh. Dad, you're not hearing me. I don't want the business, I don't want your help. I'm done. But this is your legacy too. Everything we built, everything I built, you gave to Alex, remember? You chose him even after he slept with my fiancée. Now you get to live with that choice. He tried guilt-tripping me again about Mom's anguish over the family falling apart. I told him the same thing as before. She's welcome here anytime, just her. She won't leave me, he said? Then that's her choice, and living with the consequences of your actions, that's yours. He sat for a long time before asking quietly, where did I go wrong? I wanted to lay it all out. All the years of favoritism, the continual justifications for Alex, how he discarded someone who genuinely cared about the business for someone who regarded it as a piggy bank to rob. So what's the point? You didn't go wrong, Dad. You got exactly what you always wanted, Alex being in charge. How's that working out? He left shortly thereafter. He looked around 20 years older walking out than when he walked in. I received a text from Mom this morning. They'll be moving in with her sister in Ohio next month. Dad is going to try to find a job there. She asked me once more if I would contemplate assisting them in their stay here. I informed her that my offer stood. She is welcome to stay with me at any moment, but I am tired of burning myself on fire to keep others warm. Sophie still sends texts concerning the baby. I advised her to call my lawyer. I haven't heard from Alex, do not expect to. You know what's weird? I imagined that witnessing them lose everything would be satisfying, as if karma was punishing them for what they had done to me. But honestly, I don't feel anything. Nor pleased, nor sad, just finished. I began dating someone new last month, taking it slowly. She asked about my family, and I simply stated that we are not close. Maybe someday I'll tell her the whole tale, but for now, I'm focused on creating my own life. There is no drama, no poisonous familial BS, and no attempting to gain favor that never comes. I informed Sophie that everything would now be handled by lawyers. Will I be present for my child? Yeah, I am not my brother. I do not abandon my responsibilities. But Sophie destroyed that bridge. We'll work out custody and support through the courts. She made her choices, and now she must live with the consequences, just like everyone else in this mess. For the time being, I'm simply trying to keep my head straight, focusing on work, my new relationship, and creating something unique to me. Some nights, I lie awake thinking about how messed up it is that my children will be born into all of this drama, but you can't undo other people's mistakes. You can only strive to follow your conscience. Sometimes the best vengeance is simply living well. This is the last section, guys. Thank you for following along. Writing it all out truly helped me sort through some of my thoughts. Edit 2. Since people keep asking, yes, if Sophie can show the baby exists and is mine, I will step forward, but only through legal means. No direct interaction. I secretly learned my fiancé's language after his mother insulted me. On our wedding day, I used it in my speech to expose her in front of everyone. I am engaged to a beautiful man. He's not from around here. He came to this nation for college, which is where we met. We were in the same program. He's the kindest and most kind guy I know. He always treats me with such love and respect. I couldn't ask for a better spouse. We get along well, and things are usually rather easy between us. I'm head over heels for him. The issue, and it's a major one, is his mother. She doesn't like me, and that has been clear from the beginning. I've tried to be polite and considerate. I've attempted to get to know her, but nothing seems to work. I believe, and my fiancé concurs, that it is because I am white. His mother wished he would marry someone from their own nation. It's not just that she disapproves. She intentionally makes me feel uncomfortable, which is quite difficult. It puts a strain on things, even if my fiancé and I are content. It's like a perpetual shade over our relationship. The first time I met his parents was a complete mess. We went over to their place for dinner, and his mother snubbed me the moment I came in. I tried to say hi and be nice, but she refused to acknowledge me. It was as if I wasn't even present. My fiancé did his best to involve me in the conversation, but his mother refused to speak with me at all. Despite the fact that I knew she spoke English, she spent the entire evening speaking only in her own tongue to her son and husband. It left me feeling quite uneasy and out of place. My fiancé, and even his father, was uneasy about the whole thing. Dinner itself was really silent and tense. I felt like I was invading a private family moment, despite the fact that I was only supposed to be a visitor. I didn't just feel excluded from the talk. I also felt physically separated from them at the table. To make matters worse, as I reached for one of the plates, she took it away and served it to her husband and kid first, ensuring that I was the last to receive anything. My fiancé was very horrified. He apologized repeatedly on the way home. He kept expressing how awful her behavior was, and how sad he was that I had to go through it. He promised me that if things didn't improve, we would have less contact with her. He didn't even wait for my response before apologizing and defending myself. He appeared to be as upset as I was, if not more so. The entire meeting was unpleasant, and it gave me a good indication of what I was in for. Of course, even after that dreadful first meeting, I had to see his mother on several occasions. It was his birthday, and he wanted to celebrate with his family, including me. I understand how much he loves his family. Each time, I found myself battling my own emotions. I wanted to be there for my spouse, but I was afraid to go. I hoped things would improve, but she remained as cold and disinterested as before. It became a pattern. She would point to my hair, features, or clothes and make comments in her home tongue before laughing. It was clear she was making fun of me. She once pointed at my hair and commented on how it resembled a bird's nest. Then she inquired loudly if I even knew how to care for myself, before laughing again. My fiancé became very defensive and began arguing with her. But when I asked him what she was saying, he simply brushed it off and attempted to change the conversation. Later, he revealed that his mother had made a comment about my huge nose and pale skin. He clearly did not want to repeat the hurtful things she was saying. I felt that I was not only being ostracized, but being picked on, which was quite terrible. It's not like I'm a terrible person. I actually think I'm a very decent catch. I'm not trying to brag, but I am considered attractive. I was the valedictorian of my college class, and I actually have a better earning job than my fiancé. It isn't about the money, but it demonstrates that I am responsible and hardworking. We divide all of our expenses. I offer him nice gifts, and I've even started learning to prepare his favorite cuisines from his native country. I am doing my best to demonstrate my dedication to him. I also actively endeavor to simplify our home life. I do a lot of the housework and errands to show him that I'm a partner in all aspects of life, not just the fun stuff. I really tried to win over his mother as well. I purchased Christmas gifts for both her and his father. I gave them a lot of thought, trying to locate items they could enjoy, but we were never invited to their Christmas festivities. His father is usually kind to me, which I much appreciate. The issue is primarily with his mother. It seems like no matter what I do, it is never enough. I recall giving his mother a very fine scarf, and she looked at it with hatred and threw it away. Later, I overheard her telling someone else that it was cheap and ugly, which matched my tastes. Things like that truly appeal to me. It's not limited to his parents' house. At larger family gatherings, such as parties or weddings, she does the same way. She'll scowl at me from across the room before whispering to other relatives, pointing at and discussing me. If I try to approach her, she simply ignores me and walks away. It's so obvious, yet so degrading. It's not like she's hiding anything. She makes a point of physically turning away from me, letting everyone know that she rejects me. I noticed her at one party complimenting another relative's daughter-in-law, remarking how nice and conventional she was, all while utterly ignoring me. It felt as if she was trying to demonstrate to everyone how much superior this other woman was than me simply because she was from the same nation as them. What's more annoying is that I know she speaks English fluently. She is a kindergarten teacher, therefore she has to. She purposefully speaks in her native language to exclude me, making me feel like an outsider in my own fiancé's family. It's as if she utilizes language barriers as a weapon. I recognize that if I truly wanted to connect with my fiancé on a deeper level, I needed to better grasp his culture, including his language. I wanted to be able to share that aspect of his life with him. I figured it would bring us closer. I chose to study his original language. I intended to keep it a secret from him. I anticipated surprise him one day by engaging in a lengthy conversation in his language. I wanted to see the expression on his face. I wanted him to know how much I cared. So I truly dedicated to studying the language. I spent 5 months working on it virtually every day. I looked up every resource I could find online, including YouTube videos and language study programs. I practiced speaking aloud, hoping to get the pronunciation correct. I focused on being able to hold a conversation rather than just acquiring a few phrases here and there. My major motivation was to communicate with and surprise my fiancé. But, to be fully honest, a part of me wanted to know exactly what his mother was saying about me. And, well, I began to understand. It wasn't easy, but after a few months, I was able to understand more of what Mom was saying at family events or when she thought I wasn't listening. I pretended I didn't comprehend anything around her. I just stayed quiet and listened. And what did I hear? It was devastating. It was far worse than I had imagined. All the little comments, murmurs, and laughing were so cruel and intimate. I recall when my fiancé informed his mother that we were engaged. We were in the car, and he had her on loudspeaker. She instantly began ranting about how he was marrying a white woman and how their ancestors would be rolling in their graves. The phrase rolling in their graves made me feel as if I was doing something wrong just by existing. It felt greater than just her dislike for me, like I was going against years of tradition. She stated she was having trouble accepting me. Then she said that if he had to marry a white lady, she wished he had selected someone more homely. She claimed I was too modern to be a decent mother. My fiancé, of course, defended me, but she would not stop. She acknowledged as much. She'll probably raise our grandchildren to be spoiled and disrespectful, unlike children raised in our culture. She's completely unfit to be a mother in our family. That one really hurt. Later, when we went to see his parents to start talking about wedding plans, his father was overjoyed for us. You could feel it on his face. But what about his mother? She was as disapproving as always. While we were there, she began ranting in her own language at my fiancé and his father. But this time, I got everything. She was wishing my fiancé would reconsider the marriage, claiming that an astrologer had foretold a black hole in the family because of me, and that I was infertile. She began fussing about how many of my white relatives would attend the wedding and even recommended removing people from my guest list. My fiancé declined, and they had a heated disagreement. I just stood there, crushed, and knew exactly what she was saying. To top it all off, she lied to my father-in-law, stating I had been bragging about how much more money I made than my fiancé, in an attempt to make me appear terrible. It was all so unfair and untrue. I thought wedding dress shopping may be a good bonding experience, so I invited my future mother-in-law, as well as my mother and sister to join me. I was hoping it would be an opportunity for us to connect and have a good day together. It proved to be anything but that. She was terrible. She made a critical comment about every dress I tried on. She'd roll her eyes, make passive-aggressive comments, and basically make me feel bad. What is the worst part? When I discovered a dress that I simply adored, I felt lovely wearing it. My mother and sister were in tears, telling me how beautiful I looked. What about my potential mother-in-law? She simply looked at me and exclaimed in her native language that it was horrible. I completely understood her. My mother and sister were swooning over me, telling me how beautiful I looked, while his mother kept picking on every dress. It was such a striking contrast. I was surrounded by affection, but I could feel daggers being flung my way. And it wasn't just what she said, but how she said it. She was deliberately attempting to destroy a good time for me. I walked to the restroom briefly, and while I was gone, she began insulting my body in front of my sister. She remarked the clothes didn't fit me well and made other disparaging remarks. I tried to keep it together. However, I ended up crying in the dressing room. It wasn't just sadness, it was fury, frustration, and everything. All of my efforts to be kind seemed to be in vain. It was a moment when I felt absolutely defeated. I kept questioning myself why I was even trying. After that day at the dress shop, I couldn't take it anymore. I knew I couldn't keep letting her abuse me like this. But I didn't want to just yell at her or start a fight. I wanted something more meaningful. I wanted her to understand how much she had hurt me. So I started thinking about the wedding, and then I got this thought. What if I embarrassed her in front of everyone? I understand it sounds horrible. But after everything she'd put me through, I felt I deserved to give her a taste of her own medicine. I intended to punish her once and for all. But then I started to question myself. I'm going to Reddit. Would I be the a-hole if I went ahead with this? Update 1. Wow. Thank you very much for your comments and recommendations. I sincerely appreciate all of the encouragement and humor. It's made me feel a lot less alone in this circumstance. I wanted to clarify a few points based on some of the comments I've seen. First and foremost, I want to make it clear that my fiancé has always stood up for me. He's been tremendously helpful since the beginning. He confronts his mother when she is disrespectful, and he always comforts me when I am unhappy. He is genuinely my rock, and I could not ask for a greater companion. I want everyone to know that he is completely on my side in all of this. He's not enabling her conduct. He's actively opposing it. What about my potential mother-in-law? I suppose the simplest way to characterize her is as a cruel old woman. I don't believe she is particularly racist in a wide sense. I believe she has an issue with me specifically. It is personal. She wanted her son to marry someone from her own background, and I didn't fit the bill. I want to make it obvious that all of this is coming from her. It is not a reflection of her culture or community. I've read requests to report her to the school where she works, but I'm not going to do so. I do not want to ruin her career. I might be furious and hurt, but I don't want to get to that level. Her issue is with me specifically, and it is not fair to punish her professionally for something that occurred in our personal lives. I just want to deal with this situation directly and without inflicting any needless damage. Update 2. Hello again, everyone. I'm writing from my honeymoon. We're blissfully married. I wanted to give you all an update because I've received so many messages and requests. We've been celebrating our love and, let's just say, a little sweet revenge. The wedding day has finally arrived. Everything was gorgeous, and I was overjoyed to be marrying the love of my life. When it came time to deliver speeches, I decided to try something unusual. I began in English, thanking all of our friends and families for being there to celebrate our momentous day. Then, I switched to my husband's native tongue. You should have seen the expressions on everyone's faces, particularly my husband and his family. They were completely shocked. I could see my husband's eyes tear up. I thanked his family in their native language for welcoming me, though in my mother-in-law's case, this wasn't quite true at the moment. But I was building toward something. I explained to them that studying their language was my wedding gift to my husband, a way for me to show him how much I loved him and cherished his culture. He was so moved that he came over and kissed me in the middle of his speech. Then I focused my attention on his father. I thanked him again, in his original tongue, for his generosity and genuine warmth. And then I turned to face my mother-in-law. I thanked her sarcastically for her rejection. I told everyone, in her own tongue, about all of the insults, attempts to exclude me, and nasty things she had said and done. I told them about the heinous insult she made regarding my wedding outfit. I explained how she informed everyone that I was infertile. I could see her face growing redder and redder. She was obviously embarrassed. I continued. I also want to publicly address the false claim my mother-in-law made about me bragging about my income. I replied that this was a pure fiction, intended to make me appear bad in front of her family. She was complete rubbish and a piece of garbage that had been picked up from a dumpster. After discussing the specifics of what my mother-in-law had done, I extended the message. Still speaking in her own tongue, I stated that skin color and ethnicity should not be considered when it comes to love. I emphasized how much effort I had put into learning their language and adopting my husband's culture, since it was vital to me to be involved in all aspects of his life. Then I explained how my mother-in-law's behavior, her isolation and degrading remarks, had only served to widen the distance. I looked at her straight and calmly warned her that if her behavior persisted, she would have no access to any future children we might have. I made it clear that I would not tolerate my children being subjected to such hatred and discrimination. My hubby was really proud of me. He subsequently told me that he had never felt greater love for me than in that moment, when I stood up for myself and our future. I simply ignored my mother-in-law for the remainder of the evening. I did not want to satisfy her with any more replies. She, on the other hand, was visibly enraged. She began arguing with my father-in-law and husband. Eventually, she stormed away. My husband stated he was confident she would think twice about disrespecting me again. But the nicest part was the reaction of other relatives. Many of them approached me afterwards, complimenting my language skills and expressing how thoughtful it was of me to learn their language. They told me how much this meant to them. For the first time, I felt like I belonged. That I was a true member of the family. I thoroughly loved the remainder of the wedding and had a strong sense of empowerment. I believe I proved my point and received the vengeance I sought. I felt as if a big weight had been lifted. Update 3. Hello again, everyone. We just returned from our honeymoon, and I had a lot of voicemails from my mother-in-law. My husband indicated he would support anything I decided to do, whether I called her back or ignored her entirely. Honestly, my first thought was to ignore the calls. I was still upset and angry, and I wasn't sure if I was prepared to talk to her. But, after some thought, I decided to give her one last shot. I called her back, and we decided to meet. When I saw her, she appeared different. She was nervous and appeared apologetic. Then, for the first time, she issued an official apology. She stated that she was really angry after the wedding, specifically after my speech, but that she had some time to contemplate. She stated that a number of relatives had called her out on her behavior, which made her realize how terribly she had acted. She stated that she had treated me harshly and unfairly. She recognized that I had made a genuine attempt to embrace their culture, learning the language and all. She made no particular apologies for the worst things she had said, such as calling my clothing awful or claiming I was infertile. That bit was somewhat skimmed over, which I noticed. But it was a general apology, and it appeared honest. She added that my husband is her only kid and that she has always been quite protective of him. She stated that she had always imagined him marrying someone from their home country, and that she struggled to accept me since I did not fit her expectations. She apologized for making me feel uncomfortable and pledged to be more tolerant. I calmly listened to what she said before accepting her apology. I told her I wanted to move on and try to improve our relationship. I admired her candor and willingness to attempt to change. However, I made it plain that I had some doubts. It's not like everything is instantaneously fine now. This is more of a cautious step forward, and while I'm hopeful she'll change, I'm not completely persuaded. After the apology, we actually began talking, albeit in her native tongue. She told me stories of my husband when he was a little boy, and it felt good, like we were finally connecting, perhaps for the first time. I could tell she was trying, so I decided to try too. There were still some little issues, such as her avoidance of staring me directly in the eye for too long, which suggested she wasn't totally at ease yet. Then there was one time when I prepared supper and she tried to compliment me, but it came off as a little backhanded. She said, "This dish is actually quite good, for a white person's attempt. It's almost as good as how we make it." It was better than an insult, I suppose, but it still had a sting to it. I understand that this upgrade may not meet everyone's expectations. Some of you undoubtedly wanted me to cut her off totally or continue the feud, but I believe I made my point at the wedding. I stood up for myself and told her, in front of everyone, that her actions were unacceptable. Right now, all I want is a drama-free family life. I want to move forward with enthusiasm and give this a genuine shot to be a new beginning. I believe her own family's reaction was what finally convinced her to rethink her mind. She claimed that many relatives called her after the wedding to tell her she was in the wrong. I believe she eventually recognized how biased and unfair she had been. But, and this is key, I understand how difficult it is to break old habits. I am giving her the benefit of the doubt. I am willing to try, but one incorrect move, one return to old rudeness, and the truce will be broken. I will not hesitate to defend myself again if necessary. I hope for the best. We'll see how this goes. My spouse and I deserve to live happy and tranquil lives, therefore let us pray for that. So, that is where things stand. My mother-in-law and I had a heart-to-heart and are ready to try to start over. I will keep you all updated. I have big news for everyone. I am pregnant. My husband and I are very pleased to begin this new chapter in our life. We can't wait to meet our little one. And I am pleased to say that my relationship with my mother-in-law has continued to improve. Our relationship has undergone a significant positive adjustment. She is a lot more accepting and friendly to me now. She genuinely spends time with me, offers to help with things, and even gives me advice, some of it unsolicited, of course, but I'll accept it. I attempt to reciprocate by being understanding and upfront with her. Both my mother and mother-in-law have been wonderful. They both check in on me on a frequent basis to ensure that everything is going well. They've even worked together to help us set up the baby's nursery. It's lovely to see them bond like that. We actually feel like we're forming one huge, joyful family. However, there are still small reminders that things are not perfect. We were talking about baby names the other day, and I suggested a few that I thought were cute. My mother-in-law scoffed and said, "Those sound so American, wouldn't you want something a little more cultured?" It was a minor remark disguised as a suggestion, but it still hurt a little. It's as if those old biases are still present, just below the surface. My husband continues to be extremely supportive. He's relieved to see his mother making an effort, and he's as excited about the baby as I am. What about my father-in-law? He has been wonderful. He's building a baby rocker for the nursery and has already promised to build a treehouse for the little one when they grow up. I am deeply grateful for his love and support. Overall, things are significantly better than they were before. I'm optimistic about the future and hope that my relationship with my mother-in-law will continue to improve. I'm looking forward to a future full of love, and hopefully, no more drama. Everyone seems to be in a much better mood right now. We're very excited about our little one. My wife became distant and obsessed with her career. I discovered her affair when I found evidence of her planning a future with another man. 48 hours later, she had nothing, and the electrician she underestimated had the power cut, and now she is begging. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now, let's start the video. What's up, Reddit? Never thought I'd be one of those guys posting their relationship drama online, but here we are. I'm going to lay out the whole show that's been my life these past few months. Buckle up. I'm Alex, 34, male. I've been an electrician since I was 19. Started as an apprentice, made money, worked my way up to journeyman, then master electrician. 5 years ago, I started my own business. Nothing fancy. Just me and 2 other guys wiring up houses and doing commercial jobs around town. I make decent money now, enough to be comfortable without being rich. Me and Jessica, 31, female, met at my buddy Dave's housewarming party 6 years ago. She was his girlfriend's friend from college. Not going to lie, the first thing I noticed was her hourglass body, but what actually got me hooked was how she laughed at my dumb jokes, like genuinely laughing, not that fake polite giggle most chicks do when they're just being nice. We hit it off right away. She was working at this marketing firm downtown, handling social media accounts for local businesses. She was smart as hell, always had something interesting to say, not like those boring dates where you're desperately trying to keep the conversation going. Our first date was at this dive bar that has the best wings in town. She showed up in jeans and a t-shirt. I knew right then I was in trouble. 3 years of dating, 3 years married. We built what I thought was a pretty decent life together. I was busting my ass getting my electrical business going, sometimes working 14-hour days, crawling through attics in the middle of summer or wiring new constructions in the freezing cold. But it was worth it. We bought a modest 3-bedroom in a decent neighborhood, nothing fancy, but it was ours. Well, mostly mine since I put down most of the down payment, but whatever. In the beginning, Jessica seemed to genuinely appreciate what I did. She'd have dinner ready when I got home from a long job, and listen to me about the general contractor who nearly got himself electrocuted because he couldn't wait for me to kill the power. She'd brag to her friends about how her man could fix anything, and used to wear my old work shirts to bed because they smelled like me. Never complained about my calloused hands or the fact that some days, I came home so tired I'd fall asleep on the couch before dinner. Weekends were simple but good. We'd work on house projects together. She actually got pretty decent with a paintbrush and could hold her own with basic power tools. We'd have friends over for BBQs, binge watch shows, try new restaurants, normal couple stuff. Took a vacation once a year. Nothing extravagant, usually a beach somewhere within driving distance, but we had fun. But I'm going to be real. There were probably signs that things weren't as perfect as I thought. When you're grinding every day trying to build something, you don't always see what's right in front of your face. Honestly, I've never been the most observant guy when it comes to emotional stuff. My dad was old school, fix things, provide, protect. Talking about feelings wasn't exactly part of the training manual. Things were good for the first couple of years of marriage. We talked about kids but agreed to wait until my business was more stable and she got to a better position at her company. We had a decent little savings building up, I was landing bigger contracts, she got a promotion, everything was on track. Her family liked me well enough. Her dad appreciated that I worked with my hands and built something from nothing. Her mom was always a bit snooty, typical suburban Karen who thought her daughter would have landed a doctor or lawyer, but I won her over by fixing everything in their house whenever we visited. Nothing builds goodwill with the in-laws like solving the plumbing problem that's been driving them nuts for months. My family loved her. My mom was just happy I found a girl who could put up with me. My dad thought she was a little too into social media and brand names, but he kept that to himself mostly. My younger brother thought she was hot, the little shit, but respected our relationship. We had a good group of friends too, a mix of my construction buddies and her marketing co-workers. Regular game nights, summer cookouts, fantasy football league that got way too competitive. Normal. A good life. If you'd asked me then, I would have said we were solid, not perfect. We had the normal fights about dumb stuff like dishes in the sink or me tracking mud into the house. She'd get annoyed when I'd forget some event with her friends. I'd get irritated when she'd spend too much money on clothes or makeup. But nothing major. No red flags, at least, none that I saw. Man, typing all this out, it's like watching the beginning of a horror movie where everything seems fine, but you know the serial killer is about to jump out. Except in my case, the monster was wearing Victoria's Secret and sleeping next to me every night. The first sign something was changing was probably about 8 months ago. That's when Jessica started talking more and more about this new guy at work. Mike. Mike with his MBA from some fancy school. Mike with his amazing ideas for the company. Mike who was going places? Should have paid more attention when my wife couldn't go 5 minutes without mentioning another dude's name. But like I said, I was focused on growing my business, landing contracts, managing my small crew. Didn't realize I should have been focusing on what was happening right under my own roof. But then it became Mike this, Mike that. Mike thinks we should approach the Johnson account differently. Mike went to Cancun last year and said we should go. Mike says my ideas have real potential. Pretty soon, I'm hearing about Mike's breakfast choices and workout routine, like I give a shit that Mike does CrossFit and eats avocado toast. Around this time, Jessica started coming home late from work. It started with team happy hours that were supposedly mandatory for team building once a week. Then it became twice, then 3 times a week. She'd roll in at 8 or 9 p.m., slightly buzzed, smelling like a mix of bar and perfume. When I'd ask about her day, she'd get this distant look, like she was mentally somewhere else. She started making these little comments about how her college friends were doing so much with their lives. One just bought a vacation home in Colorado, another got promoted to VP at some tech company, always with this weird undertone, like somehow our life wasn't measuring up. Mike says I have real management potential. He thinks I should be aiming higher, she'd say, scrolling through Instagram while I tried to tell her about landing a big contract for a new office building downtown. Like my success meant nothing because I wasn't wearing a suit to work. Then came the appearance changes. She started dressing differently for work, clothes I'd never seen before, more makeup, a new hairstyle, new perfume that probably cost more than my work boots. She started going to get her nails done every week instead of every few months for special occasions. The gym was next. Suddenly, my wife, who used to groan about walking the dog around the block, was hitting the gym at 6 a.m., before work at some fancy new place downtown with classes, smoothies, and personal trainers. $200 a month compared to the perfectly good $30 a month place 5 minutes from our house. She was coming home later and later, always showering at the gym after her workout, so she'd arrive home freshly showered, makeup perfect, hair done, at 8 or 9 p.m. Because that's totally normal after a sweaty gym session, right? I'm not the jealous type. I've never been the guy who checks his girl's phone or tracks her location. I always figured trust is either there or it isn't, and if it isn't, the relationship is already over. But I'm also not stupid. I started noticing she was always on her phone but would turn the screen away when I came near. I caught her texting late at night with the brightness turned all the way down. She would take calls and suddenly need to step outside for better reception, at our house, which has never had reception problems. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to use the toilet, and she wasn't in bed. I found her in the kitchen, furiously texting someone. When she saw me, she nearly dropped her phone and quickly said she couldn't sleep and was checking work emails at 2 a.m. Sure. Money changes too. We always had separate accounts for our own spending money, plus a joint account for bills and savings. I started noticing larger than normal withdrawals from the joint account into her personal account. When I asked, she'd say something vague about needing to help her sister or investing in a work thing. Credit card statements showed charges at restaurants on nights she was supposedly at girls' night or working late. Expensive clothing stores when she claimed she was just browsing. Hotel bar charges in the middle of a work day. The final straw was Valentine's Day. I'm not usually big on that commercial holiday, but I made reservations at this nice steakhouse she'd been wanting to try. Ordered flowers to be delivered to her office. Even bought her this silver bracelet she'd been hinting about. I texted her around noon to make sure she'd be home in time for our 7 p.m. reservation. No response. I called at 5 a.m., straight to voicemail. By 6:30, still nothing. I ended up sitting on the couch in nice clothes with flowers wilting on the table and a cold bracelet box in my pocket. She finally strolled in at 11 p.m., clearly drunk, saying there was a work crisis and her phone died. She didn't even notice the flowers or my dress clothes, just went straight to bed. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. When I brought it up, she got defensive, saying I was overreacting and making her feel guilty about having to work late. That's when I knew for sure something was up. The Jessica I married would have at least felt bad about missing Valentine's Day, would have apologized, tried to make it up to me. This new Jessica just seemed annoyed that I expected her time and attention at all. I'm a pretty straightforward guy. My first instinct was to just confront her, ask if she was cheating, and have it out. But something stopped me. Maybe pride, maybe self-preservation. Instead, I decided to pay attention. Really pay attention. I started keeping track of patterns. Every Tuesday and Thursday, late meetings. Every other Saturday, girls' brunch that somehow lasted until dinner. Always came home with her hair done but no shopping bags from these supposed shopping trips. I checked our cell phone records online, multiple calls and texts to the same number, always at times when she was working late or at the gym. A number that wasn't saved in our family phone plan contact list. One day, while she was in the shower, I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked her phone. It was locked with a new passcode. Since when did she need to lock her phone from me? We used to know each other's passcodes, not because we were checking on each other, but just for convenience. Then the work events started. Company parties, client dinners, team outings, that I was suddenly not invited to. It's just for employees, or it would be boring for you. The Jessica I married used to love showing me off to her coworkers, introducing me as her sexy electrician husband. I'm not the most observant guy with relationship stuff, but even I couldn't ignore what was happening. My wife was pulling away, building a separate life that I wasn't part of. The question was, what was I going to do about it? As I was deciding what to do, the universe decided to hand me a piece of real evidence. I was fixing our leaky bathroom sink when I dropped my wrench, and it knocked over Jessica's makeup bag that was sitting on the counter. While picking up the scattered lipsticks and whatnot, I found a hotel keycard tucked in the side pocket, not from any vacation we'd been on. This one was from the Marriott downtown, walking distance from her office. Weird thing to keep as a souvenir unless it had some special meaning, right? I put it back exactly where I found it and finished fixing the sink like nothing happened, but that keycard kept eating at me. That night, after she fell asleep, I did a deep dive into our finances. Jessica always handled the bills and budgeting, not because I couldn't do it, but she was pickier about that stuff, and I was happy to let her deal with it. I logged into our joint accounts and started going through recent statements. Found large withdrawals to her personal account over the last 3 months. We're talking about $500 here, $700 there, money that was supposed to be for our future, our savings, our life together. Credit card statements showed shopping charges at stores way above our usual budget. Dinner charges on nights she told me she was eating with the girls at restaurants that were definitely not the casual places her friends usually picked. Charges at high-end lingerie stores for stuff I'd never seen her wear. Then I spotted it. A hotel charge from the same Marriott downtown from 3 weeks earlier. Just a bar charge, not a room, But still, she hadn't mentioned being at any hotel bar. When I cross-referenced with our text messages from the day, she told me she was working late on a big presentation. My buddy Trent works in IT security. We've been friends since high school. I'm not proud of it, but I called him up and asked if he could help me access Jessica's email. I told him my suspicions. He was hesitant at first, but he'd been through a bad divorce himself after his ex cheated, so he understood where I was coming from. He helped me set up a simple keylogger on our home computer, just a basic program that would capture her passwords the next time she logged in. Shady? Absolutely. Legal? Probably not. But at that point, I didn't care. I needed to know what the hell was going on. 2 days later, I had her email password. There it was. Message after message with this Mike guy. Weekend plans, complaints about me, how I was stuck in my underdog mindset while Mike was going places, how she was settling by staying with me, how she deserved more luxury in her life than I could provide. The same Mike who I now knew was her direct supervisor, who had just gotten promoted to regional director at her company. The same Mike who, according to his Facebook profile, that I now stalked like a psycho, was married with a 2-year-old and another kid on the way. There were hotel confirmations, screenshots of apartment listings they were looking at together, messages planning their future after she left me, all while she was sleeping next to me every night, eating the dinners I cooked, and living in the house my work paid for. One email from Mike read, "Just a few more months, and my bonus comes through. Then we can both leave our dead-end situations and start fresh. Just be patient and keep things normal at home." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. 6 years together, 4 years of marriage, all a lie, or at least it had become one. I sat in my truck for an hour that night, parked outside our house, just thinking. Rage, betrayal, everything washing over me. Part of me wanted to storm in, pack her stuff, and throw it on the lawn. Part of me wanted to find this Mike and introduce his face to the pavement. Part of me wanted to just get drunk and set something on fire. But I didn't do any of that. I'm not that guy. Never been the type to lose control, even when every part of me wanted to. My dad always said, when you're angry, that's exactly when you need to think clearest. Old man was right about that at least. Instead, I started making plans. If Jessica and Mike were plotting their exit strategy, I needed to be 2 steps ahead. I wasn't going to be the chump left holding the bag when they decided to pull the trigger on their little escape plan. First, I set up a consultation with a divorce lawyer, a guy I'll call Richard, who my buddy used when his wife cheated. Supposedly a real shark. I forwarded all the emails I'd found, the financial records, everything. He confirmed what I already suspected. I had more than enough for an at-fault divorce on the grounds of adultery. But Richard suggested something smarter than just confronting her outright. If you show your hand now, she'll just get defensive and start hiding assets, he said. Better to be strategic about this. Gather more concrete evidence, photos or video, if possible, to document any unusual spending or asset transfers to secure your own finances before making any moves. And most importantly, act normal while doing all of this. The element of surprise is your biggest advantage right now. Once you confront her, the game changes completely. A game, that's what my marriage had become. A game of chess where I needed to anticipate her moves and counter them before she even made them. The next day at work, I couldn't focus. I almost electrocuted myself because I was distracted, thinking about Jessica and Mike planning their new life together while I was busting my ass providing for us. My apprentice, Tommy, actually had to step in and remind me to test the circuit. Kid saved me from a nasty shock. Embarrassing. That night, when Jessica came home late as usual, I forced myself to act normal. I asked about her day, listened to her lies about a stressful client meeting, and even managed to kiss her goodnight without throwing up in my mouth. While she slept, I started making lists on my phone. Assets to protect, accounts to separate, people who needed to know what was happening, and people who didn't. A timeline for how this would all go down. The next morning, I texted her that I might have to go out of town for a big electrical job, a commercial building in Phoenix that needed a complete rewiring. I'd probably be gone for about 2 weeks. I asked if she'd be okay holding down the fort alone. Her response was so enthusiastic it was almost comical. "That's great, babe. Such a good opportunity for you. I'll be fine here. Don't worry about me." I bet you will be, I thought. I bet you will be. The trap was set. Now I just needed to put the rest of my plan in motion. I made a big show of packing, loading my truck with tools, kissing her goodbye. I even stopped by my parents' place on the way out so they'd think I was really leaving. Told them not to mention anything to Jessica if they talked to her. I said I wanted to surprise her with a gift from the money I'd make. Mom thought that was sweet, if she only knew. Once I was clear, I circled back to town and crashed at my buddy Tony's empty rental property about 15 minutes from my house. He's been through his own divorce nightmare, so he got it. I needed eyes on my house, so one of my friends, Kevin, who installs security systems, hooked me up with some discreet outdoor cameras I could monitor from my phone. We set them up when Jessica was at work, one watching the driveway, another on the front door. Nothing inside the house. I'm not that kind of creep, and honestly, didn't want to see what might happen in my own bedroom. The first day was quiet. Jessica came home, ordered food, watched Netflix, sent me some miss you texts that I answered with equally fake enthusiasm. Second day, around 7 p.m., a black Audi pulled up. Out steps Mr. Regional Director himself. Tall, gym body, expensive watch. Catching the street light, I could see he brought wine. They stayed until 3 a.m. I got it all on video, the arrival, the way they kissed at the door. Definitely not their first time. How comfortable he looked walking into my house with an overnight bag like he owned the place. Same happened 3 more times that week. Once they left together in the morning, she called in sick while they spent the day, who knows where. They ate dinner on my deck, drank my expensive whiskey I'd been saving. They even took my boat out that I busted my ass to buy. While watching this show, I wasn't just sitting around feeling sorry for myself. I called my dad first, showed him everything. He was pissed but focused. "What's the plan, son?" he asked. "Need to protect what I've built," I told him. The next few days were a blur of preparation. With Richard, my lawyer, we secured my business since it was already an LLC in my name only. I set up new bank accounts, transferred my work equipment to the business name, changed beneficiaries on everything, and stored important documents and irreplaceable stuff off-site. Most importantly, I had papers drawn up giving my dad temporary power of attorney over my business and moved half our savings to my new account, leaving her exactly half, everything above board and documented through my lawyer. By day 10, I had everything I needed: videos, emails, financial records, and a solid legal strategy. Just one more chess move before confrontation. I anonymously sent all the evidence to Mike's pregnant wife. She deserved to know before making life-altering decisions, just like I wished someone had done for me. With that final piece in place, I was ready to head home a day early from my business trip and watch Jessica's face when she saw me. So, I drove home a day early from my Phoenix job, ready for the big confrontation. I had this whole speech prepared in my head, kind of expecting to catch Jessica and Mike in the act, maybe get some more video evidence. But life's full of surprises, ain't it? I pulled into the driveway and noticed something off right away. Her car wasn't there. Weird, since my security cam showed it parked there just 3 hours earlier. Figured maybe she went grocery shopping or something. I walked in, and the house felt empty. You know that feeling when a place that should feel like home suddenly doesn't? The air was different, quieter. I called out her name, nothing. I checked the kitchen, the living room, then headed to our bedroom. And that's when it hit me. Her side of the closet was completely cleared out. Dresser drawers empty. Bathroom counter missing all her expensive creams and makeup. On the bed was a note, folded neatly on my pillow like this was some romantic movie. "Alex, I can't do this anymore. I've moved on with someone who matches my ambitions and can give me the life I deserve. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce. Don't try to find me, Jessica." Cold, right? 6 years together, 4 years of marriage, and that's it. 8 lines on a piece of paper, not even a full page. I sat on the edge of the bed, note in hand, feeling nothing. No rage, no heartbreak. Just this weird emptiness, like I was looking at the aftermath of something that had been dead for months, but I just hadn't admitted it yet. I headed to the living room and opened my laptop, pulled up the security footage from earlier that day. There it was. Jessica and Mike loading suitcases and boxes into his Audi around noon. She was laughing as he struggled with a heavy bag, both of them looking excited, like kids sneaking out past curfew. I spent the next few hours making lists: bank accounts, credit cards, passwords, utilities, all the practical stuff that needs handling when your wife decides to vanish. I changed the locks, changed every password she might know, and called Richard, my divorce lawyer buddy, to get the ball rolling. While checking our accounts, I noticed something interesting. She'd cleared out her personal checking account but hadn't touched our joint savings. Either she forgot in her rush to start her fancy new life, or she was planning to come back for it once things settled. Then it hit me, the safe in my home office. I opened it, and yep, all her important documents were still there: birth certificate, passport, social security card, everything you need to function as an adult in this country. She'd been in such a hurry to bail that she'd completely forgotten the basics. Stupid. I picked up my phone to text her about it but stopped. Richard's advice came back to me. Don't engage. Don't engage until we have everything in order. Let her make the first mistakes. Instead, I called my dad, explained the situation. He came over quickly. We sat on the deck talking while I transferred half our savings to a new account in my name only, leaving her half in the joint account. I'm not a thief, but I'm not a sucker either. Dad stayed over that night. Good thing too, because around 3 a.m., my phone started blowing up, text after text from Jessica. Just realized I left some important things. Can we arrange a time for me to pick them up? Alex, please respond. This is childish. They're my documents. I need my passport for a new job opportunity. I shut off my phone and went back to sleep. Let her sit with her poor planning for a while. The next day was weirdly normal. I went to work, wired a new construction site, made small talk with my crew. Nobody knew my life had just imploded, and I didn't feel like sharing. I checked my phone at lunch, 27 missed calls, voicemails ranging from sugary sweet to threatening legal action. Mike had even called twice, trying to sound all authoritative about personal property law. I just texted Jessica once. All communication through lawyers from now on. Then I blocked both their numbers and finished my sandwich. 48 hours after Jessica's great escape, I was in the garage reorganizing my tools. What can I say? It's therapeutic. When I heard someone pounding on the front door, I checked my new security app, and there she was, looking considerably less put together than when she left. I laughed my ass off and took my sweet time answering. Found her on the porch, mascara smeared, hair a mess, wearing what looked like yesterday's clothes. You changed the locks? First words out of her mouth, all indignant, like I'd done something wrong. Yep. Didn't invite her in. Just stood in the doorway. I need my things, Alex. My documents. I can't do anything without them. Should have thought about that before you cleared out while I was working. Her face did this thing where she was trying to look sad, but also trying to look attractive while looking sad. It's a weird expression that used to work on me. Not anymore. Can I please come in and get my passport at least? I have a job interview tomorrow. Nope, all items will be exchanged through lawyers. I've already contacted mine. That's when she switched tactics. She started crying, shoulders shaking, the works. Please, I made a mistake. Mike things aren't what I thought. I just need my documents. Not my problem. You can't legally keep my identification documents. Her voice rising to that shrill tone. Actually, I can. I'll secure them until proper legal exchanges are arranged. They're safe. They'll be returned through appropriate channels. She tried to push past me into the house. I just stepped to the side, blocking the door with my arm. Jessica, you made your choice. You left. This isn't your home anymore. It's my house too. My name is on the mortgage. Might want to check that again. The mortgage is in my name only. The house was purchased with my pre-marriage savings as the down payment, and since you abandoned the residence without notice, you've complicated your claim considerably. Thank you, Richard, for that legal script. Although I felt she didn't quite get what I said, she felt it, because her face showed the exact moment she realized I wasn't the pushover she thought. Where am I supposed to go? Mike's place is complicated. Trouble in paradise already? That was fast. She glared at me. His wife found out somehow, and showed up at his apartment screaming. Had all these emails and videos? Did you have something to do with that? I just shrugged. Sounds like karma to me. I have nowhere to go, Alex. Let me stay here until I figure things out. Just for a few days. I'll sleep on the couch. No. You're being cruel. Full waterworks now. After everything we've been through, it would be leaving someone with a note after 4 years of marriage. Cruel would be screwing your boss in our bed while I was working my ass off providing for us. Cruel would be planning to clean out our accounts once his bonus came through. Her eyes went wide. How did you? I know everything, Jessica. Every email, every plan, every complaint about my lack of, While you were falling for his lease car and maxed out credit cards, she crumpled onto the porch steps, sobbing for real this time, not for me, but for her perfect exit strategy falling apart. I almost felt bad. Almost. I'll have Richard contact your lawyer about document exchange. You should go now. I closed the door, watched through the security cam as she sat there crying for another 20 minutes before finally calling her sister to pick her up. Later that night, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over. You had no right to ruin everything. I forwarded it to Richard with one comment. More evidence for the file. I spent the next couple of weeks focusing on work and getting my life together. Had a massive rewiring job for a restaurant downtown that kept me busy. Plus, Richard was putting together our divorce strategy. And yeah, it's been 3 weeks since she showed up crying on the porch. The document exchange finally happened, supervised by both our lawyers at Richard's office. Jessica showed up looking rough. Dark circles under her eyes, wearing clothes I recognized from 2 seasons ago. Guess the fancy shopping sprees were over? She tried to corner me before the meeting. We need to talk privately, Alex. Nothing to say that can't be said in front of the lawyers. Richard was a beast. Had everything organized, documented, ready for signature. Jessica's lawyer looked annoyed the whole time, probably because she kept interrupting him to make emotional appeals directly to me. I made a horrible mistake, she said at one point, reaching for my hand across the table. We could work through this. I moved my hand away. We're here to exchange documents, not reconcile. Her lawyer finally had to tell her to stop because she was making things worse. That seemed to wake her up to the reality of the situation. As we were wrapping up, I found out through Richard that Mike's situation had imploded spectacularly. His pregnant wife, Emma, had filed for divorce with evidence of multiple affairs, not just with Jessica. The company fired both Mike and Jessica for violating policy about manager-employee relationships. He was facing possible legal action from the company for using business trips to conduct his affairs. Jessica had been staying with her sister but wore out her welcome after a week of crying and drama. I also heard that she tried moving in with Mike, but that lasted all of 3 days before reality set in. 2 unemployed people with mounting legal bills in his expensive apartment that turns out he could barely afford when he was employed. Meanwhile, my life's been improving. The business is doing better than ever. Landed 2 major commercial contracts that will keep us busy all year. Bought a new truck, not to show off, but because I actually needed one for work. The divorce is moving quickly. Since Jessica left voluntarily, leaving a written note about moving on with someone else, and there's solid evidence of her affair, it's pretty straightforward. Richard thinks we'll be done in record time. Jessica still tries reaching out occasionally, texts from new numbers about how she misses what we had and made the biggest mistake of her life. I don't respond. Nothing left to say. Last I heard, she moved back in with her parents in Ohio. And I'm pretty sure that Mike's sleeping on his brother's couch and working at DoorDash to make child support payments. Their grand romance lasted less than a month. In the real world, some of my friends ask if I regret how I handled everything. If I was too harsh or calculated. I tell them the same thing. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. And when they're planning to screw you over, there's no shame in protecting what you've built. My old man told me something that stuck. In electrical work, you always plan for the worst-case scenario because it only takes one mistake to kill you. Turns out that applies to marriages too. Life's not perfect now, but it's real. And it's mine. Met that chick at the job site the other day. Been grabbing coffee after work a couple of times a week, and I'm already developing feelings for her. Nothing serious yet, but there's something about a woman who can thread a pipe and talk circuit breakers that just works for me. She laughs at my dumb jokes. Lisa thought she's the only woman on earth who laughs at my jokes, and she doesn't look at her phone every 5 seconds when we're together. Crazy how you don't realize what you're missing until you actually have it. No regrets. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk, Reddit. You guys helped more than you know. Edit. Holy thanks for the gold. To answer the most common question, no, I won't take Jessica back. Not even if she changes some wires. Once crossed, can't be fixed. My wife, learning I was infertile, grew distant and eventually left for another man. Her family and friends reached out, but I refused to help. It's common to hear statements like, I never saw it coming. That's exactly how it was for me. Though I had been married to my wife for 4 years, I honestly thought we were doing well. For the most part, I thought we were in accord. We had a life plan in place. The difficulty is that I felt we both wanted children. We started serious discussions about it as soon as we got married. She would continuously emphasize her wish for 2 or 3 children, droning on about the names we would give them, nursery decor, and other details. She would even spend hours online planning our future children's lives, browsing baby goods and clothing. It kept us linked and provided a topic for discussion. We were excited to begin this new chapter in our lives together, and everything seemed to be going as planned. But then we got some horrible news, which devastated me. After a few months of attempting to conceive, we went to the doctor to figure out what was happening. To shorten a long story short, it was me. The doctor essentially told us that our chances of naturally becoming parents were slim because my count was far too low. It felt like a stomach punch. I felt unworthy. Our entire set of plans went in an instant. The news hit me hard, incredibly hard. I found myself in a bad situation for a while. I was a total catastrophe at first, but therapy eventually helped. At first, she appeared to be quite supportive, saying that it didn't matter and that she would be okay with just the two of us. However, there was something off about the way she said it from the outset. She appeared to have dropped it way too quickly. She was all about creating a family one minute and then suddenly said she didn't need children to be happy. I understand that people's opinions evolve, but her entire behavior struck me as weird. She had stopped talking about children since she was preoccupied with baby names. Furthermore, it appeared that she began to perceive me in a different light. She would suddenly start making tiny barbs at me, something she had never said before. She would make comments about how I wasn't taking care of myself, how I should exercise, or how I should be more productive at home. Yes, I could have gained a few pounds, but it appeared like she was always looking for reasons to accuse me of something. When I asked her about the dramatic change in attitude, she dismissed it. She said that I was very sensitive and was just imagining things. But I knew there was something wrong. She was not like the woman I married, who would sit with me for hours discussing our future plans. She wasn't particularly harsh, but she had a frigid demeanor about her, as if she had already checked out mentally and was only acting. I think as time passed, I grew to trust her when she assured me that everything was fine. I didn't want to come across as needy or insecure, so I stopped pursuing the topic. In any event, after a few years, we were barely getting by. We had fallen into a practice of rarely discussing anything serious. We seemed like housemates rather than husband and wife. She would consistently ignore my attempts to discuss alternative options, such as adoption or surrogacy, by declaring that she did not want to consider them. I never believed her when she said, "As long as we're together, I'm happy." She seemed more interested in convincing herself than convincing me. She suddenly informed me that she wanted to go on a girls' trip. It wasn't unusual for her to travel with her buddies. She had done it several times previously, and I had always supported her. She had long expressed a desire to visit to America with her friends while we were living in Brighton. We had built trust over the years, so I didn't give it much attention. I ensured she had everything she needed, helped her pack, and took her to the airport. I remember her final remarks before she left. She looked at me and said, "Thank you for being so supportive." I found it unusual that she would say that when I hadn't done anything particularly spectacular. But she appeared so earnest that I discounted it as a simple expression of gratitude. That night, I stayed up to ensure everything ran perfectly. I called her when she came, kept myself busy about the house, watched TV, kept track of the time, and waited for her to text me to let me know she had arrived. Her flight was supposed to take about 9 hours, so I wasn't too concerned at first. When I realized her flight had landed, I contacted her to check in. The phone continued ringing but no one answered. I didn't give it much attention. I figured she was fatigued and had gone straight to her hotel to rest. However, as AM dawned and I still hadn't heard from her, a gnawing worry crept in. I assumed she was merely busy or her phone was on quiet, so I tried calling again and texted her a few times. After a few more hours of radio silence, I was completely freaked. Finally, I called her sister to see if she'd heard from her. Nothing. I was starting to panic. In the hopes that something had gone wrong with her phone or that she just hadn't had time to check in, I even called her purported travel companions. However, they were equally bewildered as I was. When I contacted, they said they hadn't joined her on the vacation. They were actually sitting in a cafe just 2 streets away from our house, drinking their morning coffee. That's when it really hit me. She was not traveling with any other girls. She had no friends with her. She hadn't traveled with anyone. She had simply disappeared. My stomach felt like it had fallen through the floor as I sat there holding the phone. I couldn't understand it. Why would she tell me that lie? Why didn't she tell me before leaving? I tried to tell myself that it was a mistake, perhaps she had missed a connecting flight or was delayed due to an emergency. But, deep inside, I knew the truth. She had planned it. Her stating, "Thank you for being so supportive," and the entire story of a girl's trip were all part of whatever plan she had in mind. I was at a loss for what to do. It seemed like I was locked in a nightmare, unable to awaken. I'd never married a woman like her. I didn't even recognize the person. The coldness, the fact that she had stopped discussing our future, and the subtle jabs at my appearance and health, all of this immediately made sense. I just hadn't noticed. Perhaps I didn't want to see that she'd been drifting away for a time. I just sat there that night, staring at my phone, waiting for a call, a text, anything. However, nothing happened, And I knew it wouldn't. I remember lying there staring at the ceiling, and when I awoke the next morning, I assumed it was all a bad dream. However, when I noticed that her side of the bed was vacant, reality hit in. She had actually left. After packed her bag, she vanished. The promises I had made to myself the previous evening, maybe she was late, maybe her phone died, were no longer legitimate. She had plainly planned it. She wanted to leave. I was in utter denial for the first few days. I kept contacting her phone, wanting to hear her voice and get an explanation. I even left messages, hoping she'd respond. I struggled to find words half of the time, but I kept trying. However, all I got in return was quiet. Strangely, the silence made matters worse. It was as if I'd always been a stranger to her, left alone to figure out what had gone wrong. Her family was originally as astonished as I was. They had not heard from her, and her mother had no idea of her plans. In the end, I visited her family more times than I could count, desperate to meet with her mother and gain some answers. They must have felt bad for me. When I couldn't bring myself to cook, her mother would make dinners for me. She occasionally allowed me to stay at their home. She'd sit with me as I talked about all the little things that didn't make sense, trying to figure out why my life had suddenly become so complicated. To be honest, there were times when I felt too numb to talk. I would simply sit there in solitude. I alternated between wrath, sorrow and guilt. What went wrong? I kept asking myself. Was there a sign that I missed? Wasn't I paying enough attention to her? On certain days, I would go over all of our disputes and chats, attempting to figure out what had caused her to leave. I kept thinking about what I should have done better to save our marriage. It may sound dramatic, but I was possessed by the desire to find it out. I clung to the hope that obtaining the answer would somehow improve everything. I barely slept. I barely ate. My productivity began to decrease. People began to notice. When people inquired about my well-being, I would dismiss it as I was preoccupied with personal concerns. Admitting the truth, that my wife had abandoned me without saying anything, was too embarrassing. I eventually confided in a few close pals. They did their utmost to divert me by taking me out and pushing me to move on. But even when I was among them, my thoughts kept going to her. Where was she? Why wasn't I enough for her to stay? One of the most difficult parts was the constant inquiry from others, neighbors, relatives, acquaintances, and even former coworkers who had learned I was married. Each time someone inquired, "How's married life treating you?" Or, "How's your wife?" It was like peeling off a new scab. I'd simply grin and fib, assuring them everything was all right. But each time I said that lie, it felt heavier. Finally, treatment proved to be the only thing that helped. I'd never gone before, but after months of barely functioning, I realized I couldn't do it alone. I needed to speak with someone who was neutral and did not carry the weight of our common experience. I contacted a therapist and began attending weekly sessions. It helped. I talked constantly about her fury, betrayal, and the hole she had left behind. I talked about the sleepless nights, about lying awake and replaying every scene over and over. The therapist let me realize something I had not been able to accept. If she really wanted to stay, she would have. It was not my fault. She decided to depart. That was a difficult pill to swallow. For a long time, I believed myself that I was flawed and had somehow turned her away. However, I eventually came to see things differently. I chose to ignore her long-standing coldness and isolation, believing that things would improve on their own. I had convinced myself that if I just kept my cool and put in enough effort, I could save our marriage by myself. The revelation that I couldn't, that nothing was ever enough, hurt. As time passed, I started rebuilding my life piece by piece. It wasn't until she left that I realized how much I'd lost in our marriage. I had always tried my hardest to make her happy and to keep our home life comfortable. But now, with so much free time, I'm at a loss for what to do. So I began revisiting old pastimes that I had long forgotten. I tried making fresh meals. I went to the gymnasium. I started reading novels that I'd been putting off for years. Finally, my work improved. At first, I was just going through the motions, barely keeping up. However, when I began to feel more like myself, I increased my effort at work. It was one of the few things I still felt in control of, and it gave me a sense of success. I'd always been brilliant at what I did, but now I threw myself entirely into it. The extra hours, the focus, they paid off. I got a promotion. Something I would not have accomplished if I had spent all of my time drowning in my sadness. Nevertheless, there were difficult days. A picture, an old movie ticket stub, or another minor memory would abruptly transport me back to the past. I'd find myself wondering if she ever thought about me or regretted what she'd done. But as time passed, Those instances got fewer and farther apart. Each time, it grew little easier to let go. I also reconnected with people I had lost touch with after getting married. We went trekking. We went to the golf range. I began doing activities that I hadn't done in years. Having friends by my side, people who weren't caught up in the turmoil and could support me without dragging me back into the pain, was a huge comfort. Looking back, I realized I had invested too much of myself in that connection. As her husband, I had lost a huge part of me. When she departed, it felt as if she had stolen a piece of me with her. However, I was gradually rediscovering myself. It was not quick, it was not easy. But I was making progress. At the end of that year, when I looked in the mirror, I saw more than simply a man whose wife had abandoned him. I'd rebuilt. I had survived. I was stronger now. For the first time in years, I felt free to live my life without her shadow lurking over me. And I took pride in it. I genuinely thought I'd moved on from everything. After all of the commotion, things had begun to feel normal again, or as normal as it could be. Work was progressing smoothly. My friends kept me busy. I had a routine down. Even my thoughts of her had disappeared. Sure, there were occasional flashbacks, odd recollections that appeared unexpectedly, but they weren't as often as previously, when everything I did seemed to be linked to her. She was the last person I expected to see standing outside my door on Saturday morning. But there she was. She holds a baby in her arms. I got chilled. It was like witnessing a ghost. For a little while, my brain ceased to operate. She appeared nearly identical, perhaps a touch worn down, but otherwise unchanged. And the way she looked at me, as if she truly believed I would be delighted to see her, moved me. I thought I had stopped caring. But meeting her again resurfaced emotions I had long suppressed. For a minute, I stood there in silence, staring. She smiled as if nothing had happened and asked, "May I come in?" A nerve. After everything she has done, she simply walks up here, expecting me to welcome her back with open arms. However, I kept my cool and told her, "No. You can stay right there." I said that I did not want her in my home, bringing all of the chaos back into the place I had established for myself. Despite her bewildered demeanor, she remained where she was and simply began her story. She began by saying, "I know this may come as a shock, but I wanted to come back and explain everything." Her look was hopeful, as if she genuinely felt I would be eager to listen. I was tempted to simply close the door in her face. Perhaps even laugh. But I was too curious. I was curious about the reason for her disappearance and the tale she had come up with. She went on to say that she had made a mistake in leaving and had now recognized that she had lost the best thing that had ever occurred to her. Not my words, but hers. She claimed that after much thought, and after having this child, she had finally realized what was truly essential in life. After years of ignoring me, it appeared that what was most important had unexpectedly brought her back to my doorstep. "This is our second chance," she said, looking down at the newborn. What I was hearing was incredible. Our second chance? As if this child were some sort of miraculous reset button, allowing us to resume where we left off. I was outraged on the inside, but my expression remained neutral. She went on to suggest that, despite having made a terrible mistake, we could now start over, just the three of us. She wanted us to be a family again. "Why did you leave?" That was the question that had haunted me since she first appeared. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I wasn't sure how long I could do it. Now that she was present, I needed to hear the truth. For years, I tortured myself with unlimited possibilities, attempting to make sense of everything. She hesitated, looking down at her feet, as if embarrassed. Then she finally said it. Or, at least, what she said was true. She stated that she had gone because she wanted a child, and she had found someone who could provide one, because I could not. She spoke nonchalantly, as if it were insignificant, as if she hadn't ruined my life, as if I should simply nod, accept, and go on. She went on to explain that, while the man she had left me for did not remain, she had already given birth and had realized she wanted me back. How convenient. I paused to digest what she was saying. She was standing here, confessing that she had abandoned me, fled with another guy, had his child, and now expected me to simply accept it. To pretend that none of this had ever occurred. "So, you left. Found someone else. Had his baby? And now you think you can just come back and pretend like nothing happened?" I responded with curiosity. She burst into tears and apologized repeatedly, acknowledging she had made a tremendous mistake. I remained unaffected. She kept talking, attempting to persuade me that she knew she was meant to be with me. That I was the person she actually loved. To be honest, it was difficult to maintain a straight face. She sounded deluded. The desperation was written all over her face. It wasn't love that brought her back. It was terror. Then she attempted to guilt-trip me. She went on and on about how tough it had been for her as a single mother, as if she were the victim in this whole situation. As if her own decisions had not brought her here. She assured me that this time, she was prepared to make it work. She said she needed my help. All I could think was, who does she think I am? I let her continue. I stood there listening. Then I'd had enough. You made your choice a long time ago, I informed her. And now you have to live with it. There's no second chance here. She appeared shocked. As if she had never considered the possibility that I may say no. As if she actually believed she could simply walk back into my life whenever it suited her. Then she felt enraged. Just when I thought she'd finally get it and leave, she lashed out, accusing me of being selfish. She demanded that I give her another chance and let her repair things. She even had the nerve to say, I could have taken half of everything and divorced you back then if I wanted to. And then she said it. The house should still be hers. At that point, I felt a burst of relief. Her disguise had finally slipped. Finally, I was seeing her actual self. I did not argue. I did not yell. I simply looked her in the eye and replied, we're done. You wanted a different life, and now you have it. This is no longer my responsibility, I simply stated, staring at her. Then I closed the door in her face, interrupting her mid-sentence. I was not interested in hearing what else she had to say. As I stood there, listening to her muffled screaming from the other side of the door, I felt strangely calm. She had the ability to shout, cry, and knock at will. But I knew one thing for sure. I would never allow her back in. The woman I had once loved and married no longer existed. In her place stood a stranger, a self-centered, entitled stranger who believed she could pick up the pieces whenever it suited her. I stepped away from the door and sat down, feeling lighter than I have in years. I assumed that was the end of it. I figured she would eventually understand and walk away. But no. Instead, she began hammering on the door, screaming various things. Her bravery is admirable. She had the guts to stand up and insist that I listen to her. Here. At my door. The one spot I fought to recapture after she abandoned me. At first, I pondered ignoring her and letting her scream until she got exhausted. But then curiosity got the better of me. I was curious what kind of excuses she would come up with this time. So I opened the door. Just enough to let her know I was listening. Not enough to allow her in. She appeared stunned. As if she'd just been smacked. As if she expected me to react differently. As if we were simply having a usual dispute rather than coping with the implications of her abandonment. Then she began into a long monologue. She expressed her willingness to forgive me for closing the door on her. About her desire to start over. She went on and on about how, if we both worked hard, we could get things fixed. And that's when I lost it. I laughed. Not simply a chuckle. A full, sincere and unrestrained laugh. Because this woman possessed more nerve than I had ever seen. When I did, she snapped. She was enraged. As if I had harmed her. As if I were the one who should feel guilty. You left, I informed her, my tone even. You had your chance, and you threw it all away. I'm not just going to pretend none of that happened because you feel like it. Her face turned crimson. Then she started talking about how lost she had felt after leaving. She discovered her mistake too late. You don't understand how hard it was for me, she told me. I didn't believe any of it. No, I replied. You made the decision to leave. You planned it, you lied about it, and then, you went through with it. Now, I scoffed. Now your regret means nothing. And that's when she finally gave up the act. Her entire demeanor changed. The gloomy, remorseful woman was gone. In her place was the bitter, greedy individual she had always been. She attacked me. She accused me of being harsh and not having the grace to give her another chance. Then she said it. If I'd wanted to, I could have taken everything from you back then. I could have taken half of everything you own. She genuinely stated that. I just stood there, staring at her in bewilderment. This woman, who had abandoned me without saying anything, now claimed she was deserved something for not screwing me over even more. As if she deserved recognition for not being as bad as she could have been. So, what? Am I supposed to be grateful? I requested an explanation. Grateful that you only ditched me and didn't take my stuff too. Her expression shifted between wrath, desperation, and remorse. But I didn't care anymore. That was it. That was the point at which all of the years I had spent questioning myself, wondering if I had done something wrong, vanished. For the first time in years, I saw her as she truly was. I felt free. But she wasn't done. She began pacing my porch. shouting about how I'd regret not giving her another chance. I'd never find somebody like her again. She even tried to make it appear as if I was the one losing, as if she were the prize. It was surreal. This was the same woman who had demolished everything we'd constructed. Yet there she was, acting as if I should be asking her to stay. When she realized I wasn't going to cave, she grew louder. She began ranting about how I forced her to leave in the first place. She claimed that none of this would have occurred if I had been more accepting of the entire kid scenario. Her rationale was perplexing. She was actually implying that I had failed her as a husband because I was unable to conceive. As if this validated her decision to have a child with someone else. The mental gymnastics were incredible. To be honest, I was stunned that she was attempting to blame me for her actions. I glanced at her and commented, "Look, if you wanted a kid that badly, you could have just told me the truth. You didn't have to lie to my face and pretend everything was fine while planning your escape." She gave no response. She simply gazed at me, as if I had hit her. But I did not let her talk. "You made that decision entirely on your own," I continued. "And now you have to live with it. That's not my problem." She made one last attempt. Her face returned to that depressed expression, and she pleaded with me to think about the boy. She said I was being unjust by ignoring him. She tried to make me feel guilty by holding the youngster in her arms. As if I were the villain in this scenario. But I was not buying into it. "I don't know that child," I informed her firmly. "I have nothing to do with him. He's not mine. And neither are you." That was it. I noticed it in her eyes. For the first time, she understood. She understood that I would never change my opinion. I would never allow her back into my life. The wrath in her expression dissipated, to be replaced by something else, perhaps regret. Or maybe she was just frustrated because her manipulation wasn't working. I didn't care. She had expected me to fold, forgive, and accept her back. But she was nothing to me now. She waited there for a few more seconds, as if waiting for me to reconsider my decision. I didn't utter another word. And as it dawned on her that I meant every word, I stood there, observing her. Then I closed the door. This time, I did not wait for her to knock again. This time, I knew in my heart that I'd already made up my mind. There was no turning back. I'm not sure why, but I felt like I had finally won. It ended as I moved away from the door. She'd spent a lot of time attempting to manipulate her way back into my life. But I had freedom. There would be no second chances for either her or us. She was now merely a memory, something I had finally put behind me. And for the first time in years, I felt as like I could breathe again. After so many years of pain and guilt, I felt at peace. And you know what? It was pleasurable. When I closed the door behind her, I felt a strange sensation of calm sweep over me. I no longer felt sad. I was not furious. I wasn't even astonished anymore. It was as if all the years of effort I had put into her had vanished, along with the pain, guilt, and never-ending wondering. I was prepared to go on. Because I had finally received the closure I had never known I needed. This time, it was really over. However, life never ends smoothly. A few days later, I received a text from her mother. She apologized. She expressed her embarrassment at how her daughter had handled everything. She had tried to reason with her, but it was evident that it had not worked. Her mother was a kind woman. She had been kind to me when her daughter departed, and I could tell she was genuinely upset about the situation. I didn't have anything against her. However, I did not want to be dragged back into any of it. So I just answered, "Thanks for checking in," and left it at that. I wasn't going to waste time justifying my decisions, and I wasn't going to give her mother any additional information. She knew it was over because she understood. Over the next few weeks, I discovered bits and pieces via social media and mutual relationships. She had allegedly moved back in with her parents, and things were not going well. The child's father, the man she had left me for, was not involved at all. He had bailed. She was left to figure things out on her own, as he had apparently not committed to the long term. Few people wanted to help her. She'd burned almost every bridge. Her previous acquaintances, many of whom had backed me when she initially went missing, had little sympathy for her. They were not about to get drawn back into her drama. They'd all moved on. And frankly, you can't blame them. Even her parents weren't pleased. They did not have the financial resources to maintain her and the child. I knew this because immediately after her mother texted me, her father called. Curiosity got the best of me. I almost didn't respond. He was clear yet respectful. He added that they were hurting financially and quietly suggested that I might be able to assist them. He spoke about the youngster and how terrible things were for them. "We know you cared about her once," the man added. I listened politely, but the irony of the situation made me laugh within. Then he went on and on about how his daughter only needed a little support to get back on her feet. That's when I joined in. Your daughter made her choices, I said, my voice calm but forceful. I am neither in a position, nor in the right frame of mind, to help her. He didn't press the subject. I believe he received the message. Then, out of nowhere, individuals I hadn't communicated with in years, her old friends, began to reach out. Some attempted to use guilt, telling me that she was struggling and that I should find it in my heart to give her another chance. One even had the guts to suggest, the child requires a father figure, do not let resentment prevent you from doing the right thing. I refused to back down. I refused to let anyone make me feel guilty about my decision. I'd already given the woman everything I had. Years of self-doubt, trying to be enough, and she'd thrown it all away. Instead of expecting me to save her, she had to accept responsibility for her own actions. The calls and mails gradually slowed and eventually stopped completely. It seems that everyone had finally understood I was serious. That I'd moved on. That I wouldn't get pulled back in. And that's when I really felt at ease. For the first time in years, my life seemed normal. I had friends. My job. My routines. I'd recreated my life on my own terms. It wasn't lavish or glamorous, but it was mine. Ironically, I found myself rediscovering joy in the small things. Things I had overlooked when I was married. I began reading novels that I had planned to read for years. I cooked my own meals. I took long walks. And for the first time, I felt liberated. I didn't need anybody's approval. I wasn't always concerned about someone else's happiness. For once, I arrived first. Every now and then, I would come across someone who knew us both. They'd say, "Hey, whatever happened to her?" I would respond briefly, politely, and change the subject. I didn't need to revisit that part of my life. It wasn't like I was hiding anything. I had previously perfected the capacity to abandon her. The last I heard, things were still not going well for her. She was jumping between her parents' house and sleeping on friends' couches. She couldn't keep a consistent job. Occasionally, someone I barely communicated with would message me, saying she needed aid from anyone who would listen. Some even suggested that she was still hoping I would reconsider. That maybe one day, I'd alter my mind and play father to her child. But that wasn't going to happen. I'd worked too hard to reconstruct my life. She'd made her bed. And I wasn't going to be the one picking up the pieces. Nothing could bring me back into that chapter. I was finished. In the end, I believe I found the closure I needed. She was now facing the repercussions of her own actions. And me? For the first time since she departed, I felt entirely and really free. I'd finally let go of the weight she had left behind. And you know what? I was pleased. Not in a big dramatic way. Just content, and it was enough. My wife was cheating with a younger former colleague and was also pregnant with his child. She even admitted that she no longer wanted our kids. My children found a small bunny a few days ago and took it home. They begged us to keep it, but we couldn't maintain a wild rabbit because we already had other pets. The bunny was big enough to fend for itself, so I gently told my kids that it needed to return home to its family. They were sad but decided to return it. However, I was unable to accompany them due to business commitments, so my wife took the rabbit. I instructed her to release it near the thorn bushes at the end of our land, since that was the safest area. We live in a rural region with many predators, and I didn't want the rabbit to be an easy prey. I returned to work, but shortly after, my children ran into the house, weeping loudly. My wife trailed behind them, attempting to calm them down by saying, "It's not so bad." When I asked what happened, my eldest responded, "Mama made us let the bunny go in the middle of the yard, and a hawk took it." They even recounted the unfortunate rabbit's screams. I was ashamed, then enraged. My wife ignored my advice, so our children got to watch the unfortunate rabbit get carried away by a hawk. She defended herself, stating, "It was just a bunny. The kids will get over it." But I told her it was completely incorrect. I had warned her about predators, and now our children had been scarred by what they had witnessed. Both of our children locked themselves in their rooms and refused to speak to their mother for days. When she attempted, they dubbed her the Bunny K. You can guess what the K represents. I've attempted to mediate, but my children are still angry. And honestly, so am I. My wife is upset with me for not having her back. She stated, "As husband and wife, we're supposed to support each other." That resulted in an altercation in which I repeatedly pointed out that she hasn't got my back either. She burst into tears and walked off to our room to pout. "Now I'm worried if I messed up." A friend advised me to ask here, so. AITA? Edit 1. Yes, I understand that hawks need to eat, and they may be seen all throughout our area. I just didn't want my kids to see anything like that. They're only 4 and 5 years old. My wife was a city girl, whereas I grew up in the countryside. When I was a youngster, if we had to release a wild animal, we always attempted to find a safe place where it could fight for its survival. Edit 2. I did not yell at my wife. Where in my post does it mention that I yelled? Yes, I chastised her, but I never raised my voice, even when we disagreed afterward. We whispered so that the children would not hear us. Also, I couldn't accompany them to release the bunny because I was working. I work from home part of the week, but I have to keep my phone close by at all times unless I'm on a lunch break. Another thing, I've never used the Bunny K nickname for my wife. That's what our children call her. I've tried to make them stop. I will not call my wife anything derogatory. I'd behave like a bully. Edit 3. We apologize for all of the adjustments, however several individuals misread the situation. My children weren't playing unsupervised when they discovered the bunny. My wife, a stay-at-home mom, was with them when they discovered it. They came running into the house with the rabbit, and I was the one who informed them it had to be released. Edit 4. I can't believe I need to make another edit, but people keep making stupid assumptions. No, this is not a copy of a viral online video. I have not seen the video, but I have no doubt it exists. Hawks frequently hunt small animals. Is it truly shocking that this happened to someone other than the folks who documented a similar situation? In addition, my property is virtually totally flat grassland, with the exception of the home and one tree. I own 4 acres. The lawn was mowed last Sunday, so it was fairly short. That unfortunate rabbit might as well have had a target on its back. Hawks routinely circle our area. I've been battling hawks since I was a child, protecting tiny chicks with my old pellet pistol. Little bunnies are probably one of their favorite things to grab. That is exactly why I instructed my wife to release the bunny into the bushes. Edit 5. I'm so sick and tired of folks saying, hawks gotta eat too. Circle of life, or calling me UDA, for allegedly rejecting nature. When I was a kid, I had to keep animals safe from hawks for my grandparents. Farmers also have the right to safeguard their animals against predators. We weren't going to let the hawks swoop in and grab all the newborn chicks they wanted, as they would have done every day. Yes, I was out there with a pellet gun, but it was mostly a deterrent. I never did shoot one down. Oh, I hit a few, but only barely. All it did was cause them to turn tail and fly away. And for the record, I haven't shot a hawk in 25 years. I have never enjoyed shooting anything alive. My grandfather was the one out there with real guns, taking down hawks and coyotes. But I grew up watching hawks take little creatures. Hawks had little trouble getting food in this location. However, like other predators, they are opportunistic. That is exactly why I instructed my wife to release the bunny into the bushes. But, as I stated in a previous edit, I was unable to leave my desk, a fact that many people still do not seem to understand or did not bother to read. What happened to that poor bunny is nothing compared to what I have to tell you now. I am not sure if this is the appropriate place to post, but I can't think of anywhere else. For those who remember me, I'm the guy whose wife forced our kids to release a wild bunny in the middle of the yard, despite my instructions to move it to the bushes for safety. A hawk swooped in and took the bunny directly in front of our 2 young children, who were 4 and 5 years old at the time. They freaked out at their mother and ran back to me in tears. After that, our children began calling her the bunny slaughterer. After her affair was revealed, others began calling her by that moniker, making it seem even more fitting. What happened to the unfortunate bunny? That's ancient history compared to what I have to say now. I'm chatting to you as a free man after completing my divorce a few months ago. This will be long and confusing, so buckle up. Edit, AP stands for a fair partner. I apologize for not making that apparent sooner. I showed my wife the original Reddit post, and she was outraged. So upset, in fact, that it sparked a major fight, and then she gave me the silent treatment for a week. Following the rabbit incident, I tried to get my kids to stop mistreating their mother by disciplining them with little groundings and timeouts. But the term came back every time our kids were furious with her. After a few weeks, my wife finally gave up the cold shoulder and said she should have listened to me regarding the bunny. She stated she should have carried it to the bushes, as I had recommended. But she later stated she just defended herself because she didn't want to be wrong. I accepted her apology and even apologized for creating the Reddit post. I wanted to go to marriage counseling, but she refused. She acted as if nothing was amiss with our marriage, and I chose not to press the subject further because things appeared to be improving. But after a few weeks, My eldest approached me and said she needed to tell me something. She was angry with her mother for another reason. And she was afraid to tell me. What she said shocked me to the core. I consoled her and said she could tell me anything. Well, what she said stunned me and altered everything in an instant. She explained that Mama had been bringing a man over on Saturdays while I was at work for months. She called him her special friend. She bribed our children to stay quiet about it, but my eldest sensed something was wrong and worked up the confidence to tell me. Children understand stuff. They pick up on things rapidly. I absolutely despise it when people ignore that reality. I'd observed my wife acting differently recently. She had been short with everyone, particularly the children. I tried to talk to her about it after showing her my first Reddit post, but she exploded over anything she could think of. She criticized my beauty, behavior, habits, and even my family. She also said that I used to smoke, although I quit more than 10 years ago. She then resorted to locking me out of our bedroom and crying so loudly that the entire house could hear it. So when my eldest approached me and dropped that bombshell, I quickly put two and two together. She was cheating, and her conduct mirrored the mood swings she had while pregnant with both of our children. Similar but worse. According to what I've read online and what friends and even a counselor have told me, my wife was cranky due to hormones and projecting as a result of her adultery. I'm not an expert in psychology, but it makes sense. I wanted to believe it was simply a misunderstanding, but my instinct warned me otherwise. So I did what I needed to do. I swiftly ordered and installed covert cameras, without informing anyone. To keep it a mystery, I had them brought to my employment, so no one at home would notice. I set them up on a night when my wife went out for a girls' night. It was simpler than I expected. Within a few hours, I had them all connected to Wi-Fi and could monitor the entire house from my home PC, laptop, and work computer. At first, I was concerned that I was overreacting. I thought, if I'm wrong, I'll just take them down, and no one will ever know. But no. My worst concerns were confirmed. I gathered a lot of evidence in just the first week. My wife's affair partner, AP, was a former colleague. I remembered him quite well. They were always pleasant at business gatherings, but I never thought much of it. My wife left her work years ago to be a full-time mother after becoming pregnant with our first kid. It was a joint choice at the moment. She maintained contact with her old coworkers, claiming they were her greatest friends, but not anymore. What I'm about to tell you has made her disliked by everyone. Her AP was over a decade younger than her. When she quit her employment, she mentored him to take over her position. They'd stayed quite close. My wife and I are both over 40, although you wouldn't know it by looking at her. She's gorgeous. She is constantly mistaken for someone in her 20s. And I suppose she took full advantage of that. I finally confided in my sister about what was happening. I showed her the nanny cam clip. She informed me she had a long-held suspicion. She had seen my wife at a neighborhood bar, going way too close to a man who wasn't me. They never kissed, but there was plenty of touching. Hand on the shoulder, lower back. She didn't tell me sooner because she wasn't certain. That is all I needed to hear. I purchased a GPS tracker and placed it in my wife's trunk. My sister and her husband promised to help me. They followed my wife's location during her next girls' night out. She did not go to her customary area. Instead, she traveled 20 miles further, to an entirely different location. There, she met AP. My sister and brother-in-law watched from their car. They recorded as AP continued to stroke my wife's belly while they talked. When I viewed the clip, I knew. She was pregnant with his child. Her mood swings. The secret, everything made sense. I lost it. My sister and brother-in-law had to calm me down since I was extremely distraught. I wanted to bury my sorrows with drink, but my sister persuaded me out of it. She was correct. Drinking was the absolute worst thing I could do. I took a leave of absence from work, but told my wife it was for a business trip. She could not have been more thrilled. She didn't even try to hide her happiness. Who was this woman? She was not the woman I married nearly 2 decades ago. Did someone else take her place? Is she an alien from the pod people? Did I ever really know her? The more I thought about it, the less it made sense. So I quit attempting to make sense of it. Before I left, I ensured that my cameras were rolling. My sister and brother-in-law agreed to take my children for a few days. My wife took the bait. She phoned AP only a few hours after I departed. He showed up that evening, and stayed the night. I'm not going to go into detail about what they did. You can complete the blanks yourself. But what struck me the hardest? They kept joking about me the entire time. They openly discussed their kid and how they wanted to figure out what to do before her tummy began to show, since she was already more than 3 months along at the time. There was no way it could be mistaken for mine. AP is a different race than me, so it would be evident from birth that the kid wasn't mine. My wife dismissed AP's concerns, saying they had months to straighten things out. Then she shamelessly claimed that this wasn't even her first affair, having slept with another man when she was 29 years old. She told AP that she was weary of having to be the good housewife, tired of being around a dull man like me who made her feel old, and that if it hadn't been for my financial security, she would have left me long ago. Even AP inquired about her plans for our children. Her precise words were, "He can have them." She didn't want to be around them any longer because she thought they liked me better, and she'd be having her do-over kid anyhow. I almost flung my laptop across my motel room because I was disgusted. But I controlled myself, drank a few beers from a six-pack, ate at a diner, and then watched a movie. After that, I spent half the night lying in bed, contemplating, until finally falling asleep. I thought I knew my wife rather well. I loved her. I would have given her everything. But, in the end, some individuals are simply nasty, and you'll never truly know who they are until they expose their actual nature. I made up my mind right then and there, I was going to destroy her through divorce. I am typically a polite and quiet man, but if you push me too far, I may become your worst nightmare. The following day, I went straight to a law company and requested the meanest divorce lawyer they had. I reside in an at-fault state, so once I caught her affair on camera, she was doomed. At first, the lawyer was hesitant that I would hire him so rapidly, but when I told him more about my position and showed him some video footage, he gave me a mischievous grin. We shook hands, and he promised to start right immediately. This was the type of case that divorce lawyers like working on. A few weeks later, when I was working from home and the kids were in school, my wife was served with divorce papers. The sheriff delivered them right into her hands, and my cameras captured it all. She appeared horrified as she opened the envelope, read the contents, and suddenly lost her mind. She stormed into my office, yelling at me, but I remained cool and composed the entire time. I had already checked out of our marriage. She tried to argue, but I simply told her that I had made up my mind and wanted her out of my house. I was the only one who had ever paid into the mortgage. She screamed at me, "You can't do this to me," and even threatened to tell people that I had battered her if I brought her to court. She even threatened to have me fired from my job. I told her to go right ahead. She could make up whatever falsehood she chose. It would not save her. It wasn't like she hadn't already planned to screw me over. She was pregnant with AP's child after all. Her eyes widened. "How much do you know?" she inquired. I simply stared at her and said, "Enough." Then I told her again, I wanted her to leave. She resisted, yelling that the house was as much hers as mine. Then she returned to her bedroom and shut herself within. I watched the bedroom cameras as she had a total tantrum. She then took out her phone and contacted the cops. She was acting panicked, yet she was smiling the entire time. She was quite an actress. If I hadn't previously realized she was a liar, I would have believed her performance over the phone in an instant. I waited for the cops with the front door wide open, welcoming them inside when they arrived. They came in hot and ready for a fight. However, the house was clean. There were no traces of a fight. Then my wife ran out of the bedroom, grabbed one of the officers' vests, and began crying, accusing me of being a monster. I asked one of the officers if I could show them evidence of what was going on, and he said okay. My wife was surprised. She had no idea I had recorded everything. I took out my laptop and showed the officer video footage from my security cameras. First, I aired a video of my wife claiming she would make stuff up to ruin my life. Then I showed them the video of her running from my office into the master bedroom. Finally, I aired a clip from the bedroom camera in which she called the cops and flatly lied. I had captured everything, from different perspectives. Despite her assertion that I hit her, she had no visible injuries. And the cameras throughout the house revealed a very different story than the one she told the cops. I then handed the officers a thumb drive, telling them it held all of the footage they needed to establish she had phoned them under false pretenses. Despite all of this proof, my wife continued to lie. She argued that I was an abuser, even claiming that the recordings were unlawful and inadmissible. I quickly explained that these were entirely legal. They were security cameras within my own home, not in a public place. She turned to the officers and urged them to take action. And they did. She was the one handcuffed. She immediately began crying like a child. I just sat there and shook my head. This was once the woman I adored for many years. I felt she was a wonderful, intelligent, and endearing individual. I could not have been more wrong. As the cops led her away, she cried that they couldn't do this to her. But she didn't fight back because she knew fighting arrest would just increase her charges. Once she was gone, I canceled all of her credit cards, which were in my name. I also canceled all future payments to our joint bank account. She'd have to use her own money to get herself out of jail. And she had a lot saved up. For years, she had worked while I paid the mortgage. She was far from broke. The next day, she returned for her automobile. But I'd already packed several suitcases full of her clothes and personal belongings and left the key on the seat. She couldn't even walk back into the house. Her parents came to speak with me. Her parents approached me the day after she had bailed herself out. They initially only knew the warped version of events she had told them, the same lies she had told the police. Her father was very furious. Despite his age, he was huge and strong, and he appeared ready to assault me. However, I asked him a simple question. Did you know your daughter was having an affair? Did you know she's pregnant? He froze. His shocked expression provided me with an excellent opportunity to explain myself. I got out my laptop again and showed them the recordings. When they realized the reality, they were disgusted. They said they couldn't believe she was their daughter. They apologized and offered to keep in touch to help with my children. Then, right in front of me, they contacted my wife on loudspeaker to confront her with her lies. She initially tried to defend herself, until they informed her that they were standing right next to me and had seen the tapes for themselves. They knew everything? And they wanted her out of their house right away. She tried to backtrack, but they weren't having it. Her parents said to her, "We did not raise you to be a selfish, adulterous liar who would try to frame her own husband." Then they stated something that surprised me. "You are no longer our daughter." They abruptly disowned her over the phone. They ended the call before my wife could say anything else. She called them back several times, but they always ignored her. When my in-laws returned home, not only was my wife gone, but she had destroyed various items in their home. My mother-in-law was in tears due to the devastation. I still consider my ex-in-laws to be family because they see their grandchildren on occasion, but my ex-wife is basically dead to us. A few days later, my wife returned with AP in tow to gather her belongings. AP would not even enter the house, and my wife would not speak to me while she gathered the rest of her possessions. She was aware that cameras were everywhere, and that attempting anything would just lead to a deeper hole. I wasn't alone either. My sister and brother-in-law were present to keep an eye on her. My brother-in-law made sure to keep an eye on AP from the window, just in case. While my wife was still packing, the kids arrived home. She made no attempt to speak to them, even when our youngest cried for her. Before departing, she ripped our wedding photos from the walls and hurled them on the floor, breaking the glass. I believe she desired a reaction from me because she gazed at me while doing so. But I didn't say anything. Seeing that I would not satisfy her, she collected the last of her bags and walked out the door. After she went, I had to contact my elderly mother to remain with me for a bit. I couldn't care for my kids on my own, and I didn't have much childcare help. Furthermore, I couldn't take too much time off work. At the same time, I scheduled DNA tests for my children. I was confident they were mine, but several others cautioned me to be certain. Fortunately, both of my kids are mine. I also was tested for STIs, and happily, I was negative. About a week later, my wife arrived at my door again. She stated she'd agree to a clean divorce if I would too. That meant she'd receive half of everything. If she thought I was stupid enough to consent to it, she was mistaken. I declined in front of her. There was some back and forth, and she basically admitted that she had researched the laws and discovered that they were not on her side. We had met, become engaged, married, and spent our entire lives in this state. There was no way she could escape a significant loss unless I agreed to settle. I refused. I said to her, "You betrayed me, our kids, your parents, and practically everyone by having an affair." Then I slammed the door on her face. She departed softly. I did not see her again until court. Several months later, we were in divorce court. By then, my wife was clearly pregnant, but AP was nowhere to be found. I completely anticipated her lying to the judge, which she did several times. But I had sufficient video proof to disprove any lie she told. She did not stand a chance. When she realized her falsehoods wouldn't work, she tried a fresh strategy: postponing the divorce. She refused to participate, imposed unreasonable conditions, and dragged everything out. She wanted most of my savings, a lengthy list of my own assets. I would buy out her half of the house, despite the fact that she had never paid into it. On my end, I was pushing for full custody of our children and the removal of her name from the house deed. I had clear video evidence that proved she stopped caring for our children. She was eager to fabricate lies to ruin me. She kept procrastinating and changing demands, but the court wouldn't have it. This is an at-fault state, therefore she was entitled to very little, especially as an adultery. And the fact that she attempted to frame me exacerbated her situation. In the end, she lost custody of our children and walked away with only her things, a fair financial settlement considering the circumstances, and the automobile I had previously purchased for her. The title was in my name, but I signed it over without hesitation as part of the settlement. She had made no attempts to communicate with our children throughout the divorce, so I received full custody. The house is now wholly mine, and I am totally free of her. My now ex-wife attempted to continue lying about me to others prior to and after the divorce, but my sister ensured that word spread about my wife's infidelity. Once our mutual friends understood who was telling the truth, they quickly cut her off. She and her AP left town together once their divorce was finalized. I heard that AP was not fired, but rather transferred. To where? I do not know. Honestly, I don't care. They could have sent him and my ex to freeze in Greenland for all I cared. I'm just glad they're both gone. By now, my ex should have had her do-over baby, and I hope it was all worthwhile for her. This is not the type of story I expected to publish on Reddit. I started out by talking about my wife releasing a bunny where a hawk could catch it. However, many of the responses I received back then reminded me that I should have paid attention to the red signals far sooner. I believe I just wore rose-tinted glasses throughout our marriage. But it's over now. Thank you to any readers who made it through this. I understand it was a lot to read, but this is my life. I had my ex's name removed from the house deed because every bank document proved that I was the only person who had ever paid into it. My ex was also constantly arguing with the judge, and in an at-fault state. Being a confirmed cheater puts you in a lot of difficulties during a divorce. It's similar to having a signed prenup against you. And when I said I hired the meanest lawyer in the firm, I meant it. The man resembled a bear and a shark mixed together. My ex-wife received a $60,000 settlement, as well as the car I bought for her 2 years earlier for $50,000. I had totally paid off the car and handed the title to her. She was also offered partial custody of our children, but after the court saw the video of her claiming she didn't care about them anymore, she didn't bother fighting for custody. Instead, she gladly gave up all parental rights when she saw she wasn't going to get her way. And if you think the cops wouldn't have arrested her for lying, think again. The cops here don't mess around. My ex attempted to paint me as a wife beater with a psychotic smirk on her face. That is plenty of justification for an arrest. My sister-in-law's friend crashed our anniversary, flirted with my husband and crossed the line. But the real drama started after the party. It was a wonderful occasion for my husband and me, our 10th wedding anniversary. We had arranged a small event at our home with close relatives and friends, and we were both looking forward to celebrating. However, things took a bizarre turn when my sister-in-law's best friend, Amanda, stepped up unexpectedly. Amanda had always been clinging to my husband, but I didn't think much of it. However, as soon as she entered our home, I realized something was wrong. She smirked at me and made a beeline for my husband, who was greeting our visitors. I tried to ignore it and enjoy the evening, but Amanda continued to find ways to get close to my husband. She laughed a little too hard at his jokes, and I noticed her flashing him smoldering looks from the corner of my eye. I began to feel worried when I overheard her asking my husband if he wanted to go outside and get some fresh air. My husband respectfully declined, but I could tell he was becoming uncomfortable with Amanda's attention. As the night progressed, she became more aggressive in her pursuit. She continued stroking his arm, attempting to persuade him to dance with her, and even offered to help him clean up after the party. I didn't like how she was acting, but I fully trusted my husband. I knew he loved me and would never do anything to jeopardize our relationship. Later that night, after the majority of our visitors had left, my husband and I were sitting on the couch, enjoying some peaceful time together. I was relaxed until Amanda appeared out of nowhere. She had a sneaky smirk on her face and made a snide comment about our marriage. My husband did not answer, and I could tell he was becoming uncomfortable. Amanda kept pushing, hoping to elicit a response from him, but he remained faithful to me and firmly stated that he was happily married and had no interest in her efforts. Amanda eventually got the word and left our house, but the damage was already done. I was saddened and perplexed by her actions, but I was thankful that my husband had remained loyal and faithful to me throughout. We discussed what had transpired and promised to always be honest and open with one another. It was a painful event, but it drew us closer together and deepened our relationship. The next day, I decided to speak with my sister-in-law about what transpired at the party. I wanted her to understand Amanda's actions, especially since she was her best friend. I approached her softly, avoiding excessive drama or broken feelings. I recounted what Amanda had done and how uncomfortable it had made both myself and my husband. My sister-in-law was stunned and apologized profusely. She had no idea her friend had acted that way, and she promised to talk to Amanda and clear things up. I could see she was serious in her regret, which made me feel a lot better knowing she was on my side. It also helped that my husband had been extremely supportive and faithful throughout the situation. After our chat, I felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I knew Amanda's actions were not my responsibility, and that my relationship with my husband was strong enough to withstand any outside interference. Amanda's antics ultimately made me appreciate my hubby even more. Even in the face of temptation, he had remained loyal and honest to me, and that was something I would always value and love. Update 1. My sister-in-law called to tell me about her talk with Amanda. She informed me she challenged a buddy about her actions at our anniversary party. Amanda was initially defensive, but finally apologized. My sister-in-law was furious with Amanda for putting me and my husband in such an uncomfortable situation. She told me that she had told Amanda that her behavior was unacceptable and that she would not allow any disrespect to her family. I could hear the rage in her words, but I valued her support and commitment. She told me that Amanda had been sufficiently reprimanded and that she would maintain her distance from me and my husband in the future. As much as I liked my sister-in-law's response, I couldn't help but feel unhappy about the overall scenario. Amanda was a lifelong friend of my sister-in-law, and I knew their relationship would never be the same. But, at the end of the day, my spouse and I were the most significant persons in each other's life. Amanda had learned her lesson the hard way. She may have generated drama at our anniversary party, but in the end, she only succeeded in deepening my link with my husband, demonstrating how devoted we were to one another. Update 2. A few weeks have gone after the event with Amanda, and things are beginning to calm down. My sister-in-law has maintained a distance from her former closest friend, and my husband and I have resumed our normal routine. But one day, I received an unexpected message from Amanda. It was an apology, but not the one I expected. I'm sorry for what happened at your anniversary party," she had written. "But, honestly, you're not much of a catch. Your husband probably settled for you because he couldn't do better. You should be grateful that I expressed an interest in him." Her statements astonished and hurt me. I couldn't believe that someone who had previously been a friend to someone so close to me could say anything so harsh and mean-spirited. I presented the message to my husband, and he was equally furious as I was. He couldn't believe Amanda would dive so low, and he was pleased he had parted ways with her. Although Amanda's message had devastated me, I couldn't help but feel sad for her. She was clearly coming from a place of uncertainty and grief, and her remarks just reflected her own internal issues. So I opted to respond in a sympathetic tone, rather than one of wrath or defense. "I appreciate your apology, Amanda," I replied. "And I understand that your upbringing must have been difficult, with parents who showed you no love or affection. It's no surprise that you suffer with jealousy and insecurity in your relationships." I knew my remarks would strike deep, but I couldn't help but feel relieved that I had finally gained control of the situation. "But you're wrong about one thing," I added. "My hubby did not settle for me. He selected me because he loves me just as I am, warts and all. And that is something you will never understand because you are too busy trying to bring others down in order to feel good about yourself." I pressed submit, feeling a wave of relief sweep over me. It was not the most adult response, but it felt good to defend myself and put Amanda in her place. In the end, I realized that Amanda's statements did not define me or my relationship with my husband. We were content and in love, and nothing could change that. As for Amanda, I was willing to let her go and get on with my life, surrounded by those who actually loved and supported me. Comments and reactions. NTA. I genuinely feel horrible for the OP and her hubby. They did not deserve to have their beautiful day destroyed in that way, but I am glad they handled it with grace and respect. Amanda appears to be a bit of a drama queen and attention seeker. It's unfortunate, but some people simply can't take not being the focus of attention. NTA. Amanda's behavior is completely unacceptable. She should be ashamed of herself for attempting to separate a married couple like that. It's not adorable or funny, it's simply sad. I believe OP handled the situation effectively. She did not let Amanda's conduct ruin her night, and she did not respond to her message on her level. That requires a great deal of maturity and self-control. Amanda has some significant difficulties that she needs to resolve. I'm not sure why she would do anything like this, especially to her closest friend's family. What did she expect to achieve by flirting with someone else's husband? It's simply selfish and insulting. Amanda needs to learn boundaries and respect. She can't just walk into someone's gathering unannounced and start causing problems. It's immature and demonstrates a total lack of social understanding. I believe it's amazing that OP and her husband were able to move on from this and not allow it to destroy their relationship. It demonstrates that they have a stable and healthy marriage. My husband was manipulated by his mother and demanded a paternity test for our child. I agreed, but my mother-in-law tampered with the results. I, 28F, have been with my spouse, Mark, 30M, name changed for privacy, for 6 years and married for the past 2. I'll start with some backstory. My mother-in-law has never been the nicest person to me, but I usually ignored it, especially in the start of our relationship. I was young and naive, and I imagined that mother-in-laws behaved similarly with their sons. When I was 16, I moved out of my family's house and haven't had much contact with them since. So I didn't have any perspective on what a healthy family looked like. I guess the events of the last few weeks have been building up for a while, and now I'm completely lost. I don't know what to do. For reference, when I first met my husband's parents, we were all out to dinner. His mother appeared kind enough at first, but throughout the dinner, she kept making comments that were targeted and underhanded. So, do you have a job of your own, or do you just live off Mark's money? Have you ever considered losing weight? You have such a pretty face. I think you would be stunning if you were a little slimmer. You're a great girl, but I just don't think I could ever find anyone good enough for my baby boy. I understand, I ignored every possible red flag. But, in my defense, I was deeply in love with this guy. She constantly said these things in a nice, humorous tone, and I didn't want to overreact. For the first several years of our relationship, she frequently made small, underhanded comments about my weight, appearance, or the idea that I was dating Mark for his money. The trouble is, we both work in the same field and earn nearly the same amount. While he earns slightly more than I do, it is far from enough to justify gold digging. At first, the things she said bothered me, so I took them up with Mark. He repeatedly told her to quit making comments like that. But, because it was never anything excessive, he dismissed them, stating that because he is her only kid, Mom is a little clingy. We also didn't see his parents very much because we were both busy at work and lived about an hour away. When he proposed to me, things quickly escalated. I won't go into too much detail, but my mother-in-law made our engagement and wedding difficult. When we invited his parents to supper to announce our engagement, his mother broke down when she saw the diamond. She asked Mark how much it cost and flushed bright red when he told her. I understand that it may appear to be a lot to others, but we both work in a lucrative industry and are financially blessed. The price was reasonable for him. Still, she informed him that I didn't deserve such a costly ring and that he had never purchased her anything that expensive, something she thought she deserved as his mother. She also stated that she did not believe he was serious about me after we had been dating for 3 years. Mark urged her not to be crazy and left it at that, but supper was destroyed, and everyone left shortly thereafter. His mother did not speak to him for 3 weeks after that. Later, she sent him an apology, stating she was afraid of losing her little man. During the wedding planning, my mother-in-law attempted to tamper with the guest list and vendors. And yes, she wore a white dress to my wedding. Mark supported me throughout this. We had passwords for all of the vendors, and he had his mom change them. Our first year of marriage was wonderful. We wanted to have a family and started trying for a baby right away. However, everything changed when I became pregnant at the end of last year. We surprised my in-laws at their house with a small gift basket including champagne, chocolate, and a tiny plaque that read Grandma. When they opened it and realized what was going on, my mother-in-law looked at me and said, "You sure it's my baby? Mark's, right?" I was astonished, but she smiled and behaved as if it were a joke, and the evening went on. That's when she started making a lot of comments about my weight. "You've really put on a few pounds, haven't you? Be careful, or your husband's eyes might start to wander. I stayed thin during my whole pregnancy with Mark. You should really stop being so lazy and put effort into looking good for my baby, Mark." She also mentioned women she knew who had misidentified another man's child as their husbands. It always felt like she was after me. She even joked about how she wished I wouldn't do something like that, implying that I cheated. I despised these statements and constantly requested her not to make them. She would dismiss it, adding, "You take things too seriously, can't you take a joke?" Then she brought up Lauren, 30F, Mark's ex from high school. She would talk about Lauren's skinny and petite figure and how she matched Mark better because they were both athletic. These comments, along with pregnancy hormones, caused me to cry several times. At first, Mark would yell at his mother to stop talking to me in that manner, which only irritated her more. But about the 4th or 5th month, he became distant. He started visiting his mother more frequently without me and would come over on weekends, even when I begged him to remain because I was sick or in agony. Around my 5th month, he stopped kissing me goodbye in the mornings before work, hugging or caressing me at home, and expressing no emotion at all. I was completely confused. But whenever I asked him what was wrong, he became irritated and told me I was acting clingy and annoying, or that he was just tired. He even indicated that I was acting crazy due to my pregnancy hormones. I let it go and tried to concentrate on myself and my kid, but I was sure my mother-in-law was bugging him about it. When my baby was born 1 month ago, my mother-in-law insisted on being present in the delivery room. I didn't want her there. But Mark claimed if I didn't allow her to come, he wouldn't be there for me either. At this point, I was so emotionally and physically weary that I caved in and let her stay. Although my labor was long and complicated, holding my kid was the sweetest moment of my life. I'd do it all again for him. Then, just after they cleaned him up and returned him to me, Mark went to me and said, "I want a paternity test." I was shocked. I assumed it was a prank at first. But he was serious. I was really perplexed and kept asking why. I'd never cheated on anyone or given him cause to believe I had. My job was remote, and he had to go into the office, so I was practically constantly at home. My pregnancy was very challenging, therefore I didn't have the opportunity or time to have an affair. He kept stressing that he wanted to be sure the baby was his and that he didn't want to pay for some other man's child. Hearing him say such things about our baby broke my heart. I consented to take the paternity test because I had nothing to conceal. 3 weeks ago, we received the results. As you might expect based on the headline, the results were negative. I thought there had to be a mistake, but Mark refused to even look at me. He packed his belongings and left for his mother's place, leaving me home alone with a 2-week-old newborn. I called repeatedly, but he didn't answer. I texted him, saying there had to be a mistake and suggesting another test, but he did not respond. He eventually called me 1 week ago. By this point, I was a wreck and all I needed was help with my baby. Instead of offering any comfort, he remarked, "My mother was correct. I can't believe I married a woman like you." That's when everything clicked. What did he mean when he said his mom was right? At that point, I was certain she had told him lies about me having an affair, being immoral, or something equally ridiculous. I decided to phone my mother-in-law yesterday because Mark no longer responded to my messages. When she answered, I told her I needed to speak with Mark and that he couldn't just abandon me with a 1-week-old kid after all of the issues I experienced throughout pregnancy and labor. She smiled and told me he wasn't home, and that I earned what I received. That was it. I was finished. I was done with the entire family by this time. I had my baby to think about, and I was not going to let them walk all over him like they had done to me. I was not going to put up with my mother-in-law's nonsense longer. I replied, "I don't know what you think of me, but I never cheated." The test was wrong. That was the turning point. She laughed again and informed me that she already knew. Then she acknowledged that she had submitted the incorrect sample to ensure that the results were negative, because, in her words, I did not deserve her kid, Mark. She refused to let me baby trap him. She went even further. He will never believe you or put some woman over his own mother, so just let it go. I was stunned. For a minute, I was unable to answer. Then she went on a big rant about how she always wanted Mark to be with someone good enough for him, someone who matched him in appearance. She mentioned Lauren again, stating how much she missed her and how Mark should recognize that she was the one he was meant to be with. The paternity test was simply a ploy to encourage him to leave me so she could find him a suitable companion. I hung up. Since then, I've been numb. I can't believe a real grown-up would act like this. That gets me to where I am now. I texted Mark right after and told him what she had said. I advised him to ask her himself. I'm not sure where to proceed from here. Should I have another paternity test? I'm thinking of hiring a lawyer, but I don't want to make things any more complicated. Should I even take him back if he decides he wants to return? Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Update. One quick update for everyone who asked. First and foremost, thank you to everyone who responded and offered suggestions. I honestly didn't anticipate so many people to see this. I went to bed last night after finishing this post and awoke to 900 comments. I read them all, but I won't be able to respond to everyone, so I'll answer a few questions here. As I mentioned in my essay, I am not connected to my family and have not spoken to my parents in years. They did not attend my wedding, and I do not believe they are aware of or concerned about my baby. My family is from Minnesota, but I came to the East Coast after leaving my parents' house. I supported myself through school and college by working various jobs, met Mark in college, and have been working remotely since. I don't have many friends locally, and my family is out of the question. I'll call my coworker Katie, F., who lives close and we occasionally text. I informed Katie a little about what was going on, and she was kind enough to offer to come over and support me. When she arrived at my place, I was a wreck. I hadn't showered in a week, the house was a mess, and my 2-week-old newborn was wailing in my arms. I burst into tears because I was so relieved to see her. Which was awkward because we weren't even close. But she was incredible. She inquired what was going on, and I couldn't even explain. So I just showed her the original post. Katie has been a sweetheart. She's been minding my son while I clean up, eat some proper food, and take my first hot shower in 2 weeks. She's also been a rock for me right now and is outraged on my behalf. To be honest, it feels great to finally have someone on my side. That's it for now. Several of you inquired about my father-in-law. I never mentioned him because he isn't very talkative. I'm not sure what he thinks of me, but he's always been kind to me and normally overlooks my mother-in-law. I'm also not sure why my mother-in-law dislikes me so much, but it's not because of ethnicity or religion, as some of you have stated. We are all white and not religious. I believe it's because I'm a bit of a big girl and rather tall, but Mark is really fit and enjoys working out at the gym. I'm not big or unhealthy, I exercise regularly, but I'm not as small as my mother-in-law or some of Mark's ex-partners. That is my best guess. Honestly. I'm also planning to contact a lawyer today. At this point, I don't think I'll ever look at Mark in the same way again. I know I want a divorce. I had already screenshotted as many chats as possible, both with my mother-in-law and with Mark, just in case this happened. I'll also acquire another paternity test and give him the results as I serve him with divorce papers. He hasn't responded to my texts yet, and at this point, I do not care. I don't want my son to have a father like him. I'm outraged that he didn't even talk to me before departing me and his son. I don't even want him around anymore. Update number 2. Hello everyone, it's been a pretty hectic couple of months, and I've had numerous comments and private messages requesting an update. So I figured I'd catch everyone up. It's been 2 months since my previous post. Mark returned home about 2 days after I posted my first update. By that point, I had cleaned myself in the house, thanks to Katie, and had contacted with a lawyer about divorce proceedings. Mark arrived early in the morning, looking utterly dreadful. Unshaven. His eyes appeared as if he'd been crying for 3 days. I was not expecting him. We stood there in quiet for a bit before he sobbed and apologized. I know I claimed I didn't want anything to do with him anymore, but seeing him stand in front of me was difficult. I'd loved this man for 6 years, and it was difficult to let go of everything. Hearing him apologize felt wonderful too. I allowed him in, and we sat in the living room while I held my baby. He kept crying. Eventually, he begged to hold his son. The wrath from the previous few days returned, and I said no. He simply nodded and let it go. After gathering his thoughts, he asked if we could talk. I consented because I wanted to know what he had to say. Thank you to a commenter here, I remembered to record the chat on my phone. The truth comes out. He didn't want to believe it when I texted him what his mother had told me, but it continued bothering him. Finally, he chose to confront her. Of course, she denied it, telling him that I was attempting to baby trap him for money and isolate him from his family. However, my father-in-law had had enough of his insane wife at that point, and he told Mark everything. It appears that one of my mother-in-law's nephews worked at the lab where the paternity test was sent. She persuaded him to switch the results. Mark stated that it felt as if his entire universe had fallen in that moment. Because he recognized what a lousy husband and father he had been up to this point. What a manipulative bitch his mother was. To be honest, hearing that made me feel amazing. But it was not the end. The scope of her manipulation. His mother then attempted to defend herself by claiming that I was too large and womanly for her ideal, handsome son. She wanted him to divorce me and reunite with his ex since, in her opinion, she was prettier and more suitable for him. She also despised the fact that he was paying me and our baby too much attention, because it was taking precious time away from her. Things become worse. When he came over to her place during my 4th month, one of the occasions I was unable to go, she invited his ex, Lauren. She convinced Mark that I had been aloof and irritated because I was having an affair and forcing him to raise another man's child. Lauren, who was petite and, admittedly, very attractive, flirted with him at every opportunity. And Mark acknowledged falling for his mother's deception. He began seeing Lauren behind my back. Because he enjoyed feeling wanted. As I struggled with my pregnancy, he was the one having the affair. He stated they never slept together, only dated and kissed and such. As if that makes things better. He claimed he called it off the week before I went into labor due to remorse. Then, after telling me everything, he pleaded for forgiveness. He stated that he will go to any length to resolve the situation. That if it came to it, he would remove his mother from our life for good. And for a brief while, it seemed tempting. I almost gave in. Then I glanced at my son. And I remembered everything he had put me through over the past year. How he never established boundaries with his mother. How he engaged in an affair. How he abandoned me when I was most vulnerable. I informed him that with everything that had happened during my pregnancy and after our son was born, it simply wasn't feasible. I no longer saw him the same way, and I had lost trust in him. He cried some more before agreeing to arrange a motel nearby. I also informed him I wanted to take a true paternity test again. He protested, but I insisted. So the test was scheduled for the very next day, the results and divorce. 2 weeks later, the results were returned. Wouldn't you know it? He's the father? Cue more crying from him. Is it awful that I felt vindicated? Last week, the divorce papers were finally drafted, and I served him. After 2 months of agony, he was a wreck and attempted to recommend couples counseling before making any major decisions. But I was really done with him. I requested a 50-50 asset distribution and primary custody, which my lawyer believes will be readily granted given the facts I have of Mark's behavior toward our baby. Mark will get supervised visits on weekends, and his mother will not be permitted around my child. Mark stated that he will not challenge me on the terms, out of guilt. And honestly, rightly so. Father-in-law steps in. My father-in-law contacted me the day Mark was served to apologize for not stepping in sooner. I forgive him. From what I've heard, he's always been a laid-back man, and Mark has also stated that he is likely to leave his wife. What about my mother-in-law? I don't know anything about her anymore. She's been blocked since the day Mark arrived at my door. Moving forward, I'll be moving out of our flat. While I am heartbroken and overwhelmed by how my marriage ended, I am also hopeful for the future. So that's what's been going on recently. I probably won't update for a bit. It's time to focus on myself and my son. I'd simply like to thank everyone who offered advice and support. I'm quite appreciative. I probably wouldn't have gotten this far without it. Update 3. Wow, I had forgotten about this account. It's been a year since my previous post. I deleted Reddit off my phone and sort of forgot about it. This will be a brief update for those who wish to know. Current situation. My divorce is set to be finalized next month. Mark abruptly decided that he no longer wanted to give me majority custody or supervised visits, so the proceedings took a while. But my attorney was a beast. With the tapes I have of his admission regarding his behavior throughout and after my pregnancy, I have a good chance of getting what I want. My baby is now 14 months old and the loveliest little boy. We moved across the state to a charming little apartment. Thanks to my job, I can spend most of my time with him. I've also begun going out more and joined a book club, so I've definitely met some new people here. The divorce, relocation, and attempting to raise my son on my own have all been difficult. But, really? I feel so much better without Mark and his witch of a mother ruining my life. I should have recognized the warning signs from the start, when this man repeatedly prioritized his mother before his own pregnant wife. But you live and learn. And I will not make that mistake again. What's next? I'm not sure if I'm ready for a relationship again. But, for the time being, all I want to do is be as present as possible with my son. I don't think I'll be updating again, but I'd like to add that I'm in a much better place than I was last year. And I thank everyone who has wished me well.